Hello and welcome to the Silent Evil Podcast. I'm Spencer Scott Holmes.
I am Cameron.
And we are coming back to you with another Resident Evil game. This time we're going with good old Code Veronica from the old Dreamcast era. The time period of, I guess 2000 is when its initial release is, especially for the US one. I think it's also in Japan too. I don't think it's one of those games that's that far behind. I actually think they released them pretty simultaneously. And then like a year later, they do the Code Veronica X, on PS2 and so on like that. So you kind of have those two waves of it there. And now, I mentioned doing this game because I was like, oh, they got Resident Evil 9 coming out. Like, I was thinking that Code Veronica somehow, some way tied into it. Because I really actually haven't done that much research on Resident Evil 9. Like, I avoid all the trailers and all that kind of stuff. Because if I know I'm going to buy a game, I don't necessarily feel like I need to see everything for it. Yeah, I'm like, you already got me sold. I mean, I'll buy a Resident Evil game if I don't even like it. I remember that was like Resident Evil 7. I played that demo. I was like, this is the worst demo I've ever played. There's no way I'm going to like this game. I'll buy it day one anyway. But I'll buy it day one anyway.
Yep.
Yeah. Lo and behold, I liked it a little bit more than I thought, but not definitely my least favorite Resident Evil. But no, 9 it was. Then you're like, dude, it's not Ashford, it's Ashcroft. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense.
Well, so this whole time I'm playing this game because Spence mentions that at the start. He's just like, oh, we should totally play Code Veronica before 9 comes out. Okay, fine. I'm playing and I'm like hours and hours and hours of playing this game, like trying to make the connection of like, how does Code Veronica tie into Resident Evil 9? And then I thought about it and I was like, is it Ashford? Because the new character's name is Grace Ashcroft, And I was like, and then I text you that and you're like, oh yeah, that's what
Yeah, because I was thinking for some reason, I don't know why, for some reason I thought it was like Ashford. I'm like, oh, maybe it's like a cousin or something like that. But oh, no. It's Ashcroft, one of the characters from Outbreak instead.
Right.
So it's like, oh, okay, never mind. So it has nothing to do with Code Veronica. But that's okay, though. You know what? There's nothing wrong with pulling out ye old Code Veronica and going through another run of this great classic that I think actually stands out even more as it gets older and older in a weird way.
Yes. Admittedly, I've played through this game once. I've played the first half of this game a million times, but there's the one part, But yeah, no, super fun to go back to this. I very much enjoyed, yet again, like another like week long worth of play, consistent night after night, hour or two, every couple, every night or whatever. Great run, so much fun.
Yeah, well, my original experience was on Yield Dreamcast version because the Dreamcast, what makes it such a special game or console to me is this was the first system that I ever got that I got it like when it pretty much came out. Because every system I ever got beforehand, like Genesis and PlayStation and even the other systems I even played too, I always felt like I was late to the party on all those. I got them at the tail end, But the Dreamcast was the first one that I saved up all my money from birthday and Christmas and everything like that and got the Dreamcast. And so I was getting these new games, and pretty much I got this one just a tad bit later because I would buy everything used because that was the way you could get more games is you buy it used. Once I figured that secret out, I'm like, that's how you get a lot more. You can make your like allowance go, it can go a lot farther that way. But just getting that game initially, and just going in it from Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3 and all that stuff, and me and RJ sat down to play it that night, and how realistic this game felt, especially when it first came out, because that's how those games on the Dreamcast were. They were just, the graphics were just mind-blowing at that time period, because that was a huge jump from the N64, PlayStation, and Saturn. And when you had that Dreamcast and all those games there too, and just seeing all this terror come to route live and full 3D and all that kind of stuff, and the heartbeat when you're going up the stairs, like the dun 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 dun, and then with the little rumble pack and the Dreamcast controller, And even small things like the VMU that had like Claire's health bar on there and everything like that. There was all these extra neat features that really made this experience stand out so much, and that's why I think it always is one of those ones that I think a lot when I think about, the classic Resident Evil times, and how good this one is.
Oh, yeah. Yep. See, so like I never have, outside of that emulator version that I started to play this run on, I've never played the Dreamcast version of this. I've only ever played X on PS2. And I remember very specifically
I got all the show and tell stuff
there you go.
For, like, my Code Veronica. See, there's my X on PS2 strategy guide.
Heck yeah.
Even I'll just finish off my show and tell. I haven't got the book of Code Veronica here. Why not? Because SD Perry's like the best when it comes to those. And then I even have the other Resident Evil Code Veronica Gun Survivor 2. I had to import it from Japan, so. But,
let me grab mine real quick. Hold on. So this supposedly like has a.
The double disc, because isn't it?
Well, the double disc. Mine doesn't have it. Supposedly, there's a little small strategy guide that'll come in one of these versions. Mine doesn't have that, but
it probably is like one of the Prima strategy guides. Like they used to put those demo ones in there once in a while. You'd find in that era.
Yep. But no. Yeah, and yet again, dude, like being able to like actually play on physical hardware, like original hardware on CRT, like dude, the experience was so good. It brought me right back to being like 10, 11 years old again, playing this for the first time. So yeah, lots of fun.
And funny enough, on this version, I chose because I've had it sitting there for a while, but there was an Xbox 360 and PS3 HD remaster that they put out at Code Veronica, and I bought it when it was on sale a good while ago on Xbox, and I always just ended up just playing the PS2 one because I remember like when you kind of compare the versions when you looked them up online, people kind of went like, yeah, the HD one's kind of cool, but it's really dark. That was always the biggest complaint, was it's really dark. And I was like, yeah, that kind of the game's already kind of dark as is. I remember just even on the Dreamcast version, you'd turn the brightness up all the way on the TV and so on. That was always a Resident Evil must, is that like the brightness should be really high, so everything's just pretty much muted in color tones and so on.
Everything's just super washed out.
But I was like, I'm just going to give the Xbox One a go. I can get some new achievements in it. Why not? I haven't used it. I'll get my money's worth out of that one. And, other than the fact it was kind of dark, it was neat, though, because they really took the game and actually redid it in an actual widescreen version. They didn't crop it like the Resident Evil Remake and Zero ones that they did because that widescreen is, they chop it off like when you buy Dragon Ball Z on DVD, so you're not getting the actual, version. But it's not the worst, but it's just a little bit noticeable. But at least on Code Veronica, they kind of added in there, and then they put it up to 720p. So it is a cool way to go. It's probably, at the end of the day, I would still take either the PS2 version and or the Dreamcast one.
Sure.
But I think that one on 360 and PS3 is still worth checking out.
Yeah, even for just accessibility, is like what all the footage that I've seen of the HD version or whatever, that the shadow and lighting that they did in that actually looks really good. And I think it's mostly because of its like 3D map design, because this is not a static pre-rendered backgrounds and whatnot, because everything's like in engine. So like everything that I was seeing, like as the character's like walking down a hall and like the way that the light is like breaking beyond like the 90-degree corners and whatnot, and like the shadows moving and all that looks really good. So yeah, it was cool to see kind of like that fresh paint, overlay on top of, the version I was playing, like it was really cool. So.
No. They do add some stuff to it. It's really cool. It just has that feeling of playing a game on like a TV where the contrast is up really high and you can't adjust it.
Yeah.
That's 100% it, because there's some herbs and so on like that just blend into the backgrounds. Like you're not going to see them, because they don't have the little flashy icon on everything. They have flashy icons on like key items, but sometimes herbs and stuff just are there. So if you're not pressing X the whole time or whatever button it is, you're not going to find them.
No, and even in the PS2 version, because like I had the brightness turned up pretty goddamn high, but even then, like the way that the rendering worked back then, and they can't render like far out, objects and whatnot. So they, a lot of games of this era like used fog like very heavily. So that paired with extreme brightness, like everything was just like way oversaturated and blown out of proportion, and I was still missing items on the ground because of the way that the contrast looks, and certain framings, like of the camera and whatever too. So yeah,
it's one of I will say, actually, I think on that 360 version though, I didn't notice as much fog though, so that might have been kind of cleared up on there too. So I guess you do get those kind of bonuses there. So there was a lot of merits to be had with that one. As I said, it is just kind of a little bit overly dark. It's about its only kind of major issue.
Yeah.
Beyond that though, it still is kind of the core PS2 version, or technically even Dreamcast version, because if you were in Japan, they actually released Code Veronica X on Dreamcast as well there, and I think that came first, and then the PS2 one. They probably came around the same time, but you got that there, and then realistically, the only difference, if anyone's ever wondering what is the difference between X and Code Veronica, is it's just a little bit more cutscenes. That's kind of it. The gameplay's not changed or anything like that. I think they changed Steve's look a little bit more because he looked a little bit more Leonardo DiCaprio in the Dreamcast one, and so all they did is they just, instead of his hair kind of coming down, like, because he's literally got like the haircut straight out of like Titanic or something like that.
Yep.
They shuffle it back just a tad bit. Nothing too radical.
Yep. Yeah. I'd be curious, like, to actually get my hands. I would like to do at least like the prison section or like the early portion of the game or whatever, like on the Dreamcast version, to see really if there is much of a difference between it and the PS2 version in terms of those things like rendering and like things like that. I was texting you, like late on in the game when we get to a certain boss, and like, in that fight, like I said, dude, like you literally just can't see the boss until like he's so close to you that he's hitting you at that point, and whatnot. And that's how bad the fog was. So I was super curious about like the 360 re-release, version of it, and to see if like if they did increase that fog layer, to where you could see a bit further or something. Because
I'm kind of guessing they did, because we're talking about the Nosferatu boss about halfway into 3/4 of the game, maybe, give or take. And because I could see sort of a silhouette profile, not easily, but just enough that like that I could make out, because at least that area is well lit because you're outside, or supposedly kind of like that. So I was able to just blast away. Now I couldn't see his heart or anything like that. I just shot towards the dead center. That was like what my frame of reference was.
No, like I said, on my end, like you could hear him, but the entire, like, we'll get to that when we get to the point or whatever, but like that entire fight was an audio fight for me. It wasn't a visual fight at all. But yeah.
But yeah, this one, the one thing I will say, just even speaking of graphics and stuff, since we're kind of talking about that there, is I remember about in like the 2000s, maybe a little bit later day 2000s, when I would compare this game to say like 2 and 3, I used to think of this one being like, it's cool that it is all in 3D, but it almost doesn't look nearly as good as Resident Evil 2 and 3 because it doesn't have pre-rendered backgrounds and so on like that. But oddly, when I was playing this again, I almost kind of accepted just the graphics the way they were, and really enjoyed them for what they were, in a sense.
Yeah.
Instead of just, don't get me wrong, the pre-rendered backgrounds in 2 and 3 are just so dialed in. I think that's the thing that makes Resident Evil, the remake, and 0 really cool, is because now they're doing that era of consoles, but they still have pre-rendered graphics, so they almost look lifelike in a sense by that point. And you kind of always wondered, like, man, what would that would be like on Code Veronica if they would have had that, because it made it kind of look a little bit like that in-between, slightly muddy and everything like that. But I think that almost adds to the detail and the rawness and what this game truly is because of that.
It really, what this game feels like to me, in the succession of like RE1 through Dino Crisis up to this and whatnot, is like, obviously like this is on like next generation hardware at the time. This felt like an evolution to the Dino Crisis formula in terms of, like actual rendered, scenes and whatnot. So for that, I think it was actually really good. There was actually one section that I recorded that I was gonna send to you, and I was like, I'll just talk about it. It's literally just a scene of Claire just, if you slow walk down it, like she's like heading towards you, so like you're facing her like in the camera view or whatever. She's like heading towards you, and then the camera like flips, and then it's like following her down this hallway or whatever. And there's a very similar scene in Dino Crisis that does similar things where the camera follows. And just like the way that they frame it, dude, it's just like, it's so good because it's so atmospheric, and like there's like a flickering light like at the end of the hallway and whatnot, and that's like bouncing, bounce lighting like off and thing. But it's all like, it's from that era. It was like, how they used to render those types of things and whatnot. And I just thought, I was like, damn, this looks so good for what it was, at that time.
Yeah.
So There was a handful of things I recorded.
That's the thing, is it's such early days of that kind of Dreamcast, GameCube, PS2, Xbox original, and all that stuff, and just having those kind of graphics the way they are. And that's the thing, is by it not being pre-rendered, you can have the movable camera angles and so on. You know, we said that on the Dino Crisis one, that game was definitely the test run to try out things for Code Veronica. Because really, Code Veronica is that weird game that it should be Resident Evil 3. That's how it was designed. That was what it was made for, and so on. But there was that weird thing that Sony had. They're like, no, we get the numbered ones. You know, right. we have this for some reason weird exclusive rights to Capcom. I think they actually just like blackmailed Capcom and said, no. If you don't give us the numbered one, guess what? You're gonna have to go to Nintendo.
Right. Developer cartridge, bitch.
Yeah. So it's like it's weird because Code Veronica really does feel like it's 2 and then Code Veronica, and Nemesis really seems like that should be it is a spin-off. That's more kind of the spin-off. It just adds more story to Resident Evil 2 in a sense. You know, don't get me wrong, I love Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, but if you think about it like that, I think if Code Veronica would have had the 3 in the title, I think that game would have been a much bigger game. And no, it's still a large game, but it's almost more like if you really like Resident Evil, then you know about Code Veronica. But the casual fans don't seem to necessarily know that one as much.
No, and I also think too, because a lot of like what was going on, like from what I remember of this era, is like you got to think of like what was cross releasing alongside this. I mean, like Halo was coming out, you know, like I mean, you know, stuff like that. So you know, like I was fortunate because I probably would have never played this game either, other than the fact that my buddy Mike, you know, like my friend Mike at the time, like he got a copy of it and we sat down and we played it over the course of a weekend. And it was, you know, like one from that era of like, you know, we only get to hang out like Friday night, all day Saturday, all day Sunday, but 6 p.m. Sunday, mom's come pick my ass up, you know, like we got to finish this. And you know, like those memories like started flooding back, like playing through this game. And what's so funny about it too is like, you know, there's like a 20-year gap in between the last time I've ever touched Code Veronica before, you know, and how much I really remembered of, especially the early portions of this game, like leading to the timer fight on the plane, you know, like but yeah, super fun. So
yeah, no, those memories there are so good. And that's the thing, is if you catch it on the Dreamcast, this game's super advanced, but by the time it comes out on PS2, it is a little bit like, because it's that weird in between era games, because in a sense that's sort of what the Dreamcast was comparatively to it. More powerful than an N64 and a PlayStation, a little bit behind PS2 and GameCube and, you know, Xbox. Yeah. And I think really the biggest thing for Dreamcast is a little bit off-topic thing, but is the fact that they didn't put DVDs in there. I think that really got them. They had that weird enhanced CD thing. It was a GDI CD, so it was like a 1 gig CD instead of a 700 megabyte one, you know, and that's why Code Veronica's 2 discs on Dreamcast and everything there. But the downfall is that once those other systems come out, like, were you going to make games like 8 CDs long?
Yeah, exactly.
that was the thing, is like, you know, especially if you have a, you know, even though I don't think on PS2 or Xbox anything, I don't think they use more than 4 gigabyte DVDs. I don't think there was any dual layered ones for the most part. That kind of came with the 360, you know, PS3 era and so on. PS3 had Blu-rays, but so games of that time too were really only like I can imagine Code Veronica is probably, you know, like it's obviously it's under that to exist on the DVD, so like I can imagine that's probably a 2.5 maybe 3 gigabyte, you know, size game or so. I mean, by Dreamcast standards, it can't be more than 2 gigabytes because it's only 2 discs.
Yeah. So yeah, that's probably about right. But yeah, again, you know, like going to the popularity thing of this title, like I remember playing it again because of my buddy Mike. But I think that there was just like so many other big things going on. We already had received 3 Resident Evil titles up until this point. So again, is this like the start of that era burn, you know, like of classic, you know, survival horror where people are like, you know, and especially how like wonky this game is, like, you know, how quirky it is. Like Resident Evil is like quirky in general, you know, like it's got a lot of wacky stuff that, you know, explores things that are just like, you know, like I don't know about that. This one takes it to an extreme, you know, to an effect, you know, and it's like, so I can see why it's not regarded as like, you know, top tier S-class, survival horror game. But I think in general, like I genuinely and really enjoyed this. It's got its quirks, but like in general, it's a cool continuation story of Claire, so.
Yeah. Well, and the thing too is this game was like extremely well praised on the Dreamcast. It was a high-end game there. Once again, I think that 1 year gap though to like the PS2, as I remember it was like still liked on the PS2, but it was kind of like it's like you're getting an old game ported in a sense. Is sort of how it felt. And then by the time it was re-released like on GameCube and stuff, that was like the point where people were just hating survival horror games. If you weren't really into survival horror games hardcore, once again, because I remember this was that game that had that famous X-Play episode back in the day where they gave Code Veronica a 1 out of 5, which is so mind-blowing. I mean, I know they hated Resident Evil, so I guess that's, how much they're going to give it's not that much. Where, GamePro, who loved Resident Evil and survival horror, is I want to say gave this game like a 4.5 out of 5, But this was the game that kind of starts to be in that era where survival horrors are really going out of fashion. And we were talking about that with Resident Evil 0 on the last episode, that 0 kind of came out right then. It's pretty much the last classic survival horror game, before like the indie games start doing stuff. And before it switches over to Resident Evil 4 and all that kind of action survival horror style. Code Veronica is like almost like the height of like the golden age boom, all that stuff, and then it just almost starts to cascade right after this. I mean, you hit a couple other little big moments, like the remake is another big one. 0 comes down, and then it just kind of comes crashing down, and then by that point people don't want to deal with this anymore. They're kind of done with this genre. It kind of came and went.
Well, I think the other thing to think about too, unless I'm wrong, is this the first Resident Evil title on a Sega console?
No, it's the second, because Resident Evil 1 was on on Saturn.
Okay. So, I mean, that was going to be one of my comments is like, if that were the case, if this were the first Resident Evil game, I could see why it was so popular on, Dreamcast. Now, was this a launch title for the Dreamcast?
No, it came out just like because the Dreamcast in the U.S. came out in '99, like Christmas era.
It was '99, okay.
Because I remember I bought mine like give or take January. By the time I kind of wrangled up all the money and everything like that, and then pretty much because as I said, birthday, Christmas, you saved all that stuff up and put it all together, and then I want to say this one came out. I'll take a look real quick, but I want to say it was like May. Yeah. What's it say here? Did I saw that? Oh, here it is. Release date. Of course, in Japan it was February, but it was March. It came out in 2000. Okay. So I felt like I got it like pretty darn soon right afterwards. I only got like maybe a month after it came out.
Yeah. I consider most games, like most games that launch within 6 months of a console, like I consider a launch title, more or less. So that's what I would consider this for sure.
Yeah, that's how I always kind of looked at it too, because I think they did the thing, because this game actually, I think, was supposed to be close to it, and then it got pushed back a little bit, which they did the right thing. That's what you're supposed to do, they ported Resident Evil 2 to the Dreamcast to kind of hold you over. Yeah. And that was the big one too, is that they wanted to put Resident Evil 2 on the Saturn, and for some reason they just could not get it to run properly on there. Ironically, they could get it to run properly on the N64, but for some reason the Saturn was giving them issues, and that's what led to that Sega game Deep Fear coming out, because Sega's like, well, we need something for our system, so let's put that out. Which that game's badass. Of course, it didn't make it to the US, but it was the last game for Saturn in Europe, which is kind of a cool little factoid.
Interesting.
But so Code Veronica was initially also worked for the Saturn, and then they quickly switched it to like the Dreamcast and so on like that. And that was kind of the thing that was like, where they're going to abide Sega by saying like, we're sorry we kind of screwed you over with some other things, so we'll give you Code Veronica exclusive rights. But the downfall is it's supposed to be 3, but because of that PlayStation ordeal, it kind of got left there. But
yeah, that's interesting.
Beyond all that, it's just a weird like politics thing that kind of like, because even just in playing this game and so on like that, it does feel like it is like a good ending to, like, I guess you would say, the trilogy. It captures a lot of those elements in there. You got both Chris and Claire, the Redfields from both 1 and 2, and even just the start of this game, you start off, you're playing as Claire. It's like 3 months after Resident Evil 2, and now she's over in Paris. She's searching with Leon for her brother. For some reason, Chris is always being lost. And I think they say other STARS members too. So who? Maybe Barry, maybe Rebecca. Who knows? You know. And so she's in this like Paris facility. It starts off with this cool CG cut scene that especially was mind blowing back in the day. You know, these are always the ones that like the almost like the in-game graphics actually hold up stronger than sometimes the CGI ones. But it's just because the way that they're compressed and rendered. If you could have got like an original raw copy of it, I bet you it looked amazing. But mostly they deleted those back in the day to save hard drive space. But whatever, she's in this facility, she's running through, it's almost got this John Woo-like action and stuff. She's fighting off all these umbrella guys, even has that scene where she puts her hands up. She's got the gun there, the umbrella guys are holding gunpoint, and then she slowly drops the gun and falls down, grabs the pistol and blasts away, which I think they used in that second Resident Evil movie, Apocalypse. Mila Jovovich does that same thing in there. But that's what starts it off. So she's going through this, and then she gets arrested and is taken to Rockford Island, and she's a prisoner there. And you start the game off. There's like the prison cell dude who kind of, whatever, who's got you there, and he's bleeding out. He's pissed because his hemostats ran out and so on like that. He's like, if this was Dino Crisis, I would have 15 other like things a year. No, exactly.
There's only one other of these things on the whole fucking island.
Exactly. So he's pissed, and he's like, you know what? There's been an outbreak here. Everything's been going crazy. You, by all means, go ahead, leave. I'm gonna die here anyway, so I don't even care anymore. So Claire's there.
And I love this, dude. This first scene is so funny to me, especially in the version that I'm playing, because again, my screen is just blown out with brightness and whatnot, And it wants to introduce like this very first mechanic to you, where Claire wakes up in the cell and it's very dark and whatnot, and like things are just exploding outside and whatnot. It's just like an air raid's going on is what it sounds like. And she like stands up, and like all of a sudden you see just a dark figure walk in front of the cell in front of you. It wants you to go into your menu and equip the lighter, so it teaches you like, hey, lighter means bright, like you can see. But the whole time, like in my view, like I could just see him. He's just standing there, and like Claire goes into the menu and like flicks the thing, and it goes, like, and it's all like supposed to be like a jump scare.
Which is more just looks like Claire just sees like she's a dark skinned man. She's like, oh god,
oh god.
So it does.
I'm sorry, sir. I thought you were a zombie.
Because that's the same way. Because even like before, it's like, I guess all these games always want you to turn that brightness and contrast down so far that it's that classic thing you see in modern games where they'll give you the 3 icons, and they're like, you should see this one here, barely see this one, and don't see this one at all. And I'm always like, nope, that one over there, I want to be able to see that one clear as day. That's how I know the brightness is good.
So that's what's been interesting about playing on OLED for as long as I have. So like, with the OLED and the HDR kind of mixed together, most of my games just auto recognize that, and they just produce, that type of image and whatnot. But like blacks on this screen are like black, like they are so like, because there's no light bleed coming out of them at all, because there's individual pixels all across it. So anyways, techie nerd shit. So but
I know those are those things that like I got like mixed feelings about them, because If it was a movie or something like that, or a cutscene, it looks great. But sometimes in gameplay, it's like, no, I kind of need to see some of that stuff a little bit more. I don't care about your graphics necessarily. It's like it's more about what can I see.
Yep.
But yeah, the start of this one's just great because you start off okay. Now all you got is the lighter. There's some ammo sitting there. There's an ink ribbon you can pick up or so on like that. But there's not much. And as I said, you hit those first stairs, and you get that first like dun dun. Dun dun, the heartbeat, the controller's slowly vibrating. Claire's going up those stairs so slow in a sense. You're like, what am I getting into here? It's really preparing you for that. And you get up to the top and you see explosions, you see fire and all this stuff, and all of a sudden there's like 6 zombies right off the bat. You were totally unarmed. I don't even know if you have you don't even have the knife by this point, do you? Oh no, you do.
No, you can grab it.
You do have the knife. Because I think I remember as kids we sat there and killed every single zombie with the knife.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Nowadays I just go. I almost never use the knife anymore. It's just more like you put that away.
Yeah. I used it like maybe for a couple, like when I had the pistol and I had like 2 stacks of ammo, I was like, screw it, I'm just gonna attach a knife so I don't waste my ammo, you know. But because this game just feeds you ammo, dude. Like you get so much fucking ammo in this game, it's insane. But at the same time, like enemies are resilient, they're so tough. I'm so glad that the knife at least has the dual hit thing. So like if you knock them on the ground and like you aim downwards and you just hit them like in a certain direction or whatever, like at a diagonal, you can hit them like twice, you know.
Yeah.
You know, like that. So the knife can be useful, but later on in the game, like no way, like no fucking way.
Well, there's that practical strategy in Resident Evil games that with the knife and gun combo to save ammo is that you shoot the zombies, when they fall down on the ground, you re-equip the knife and you hack away at them, and that a lot of times can at least save you a couple rounds each time, you know. But it's not really that practical in a lot of the older Resident Evil games for the fact that you got to switch back and forth in the menu. It takes up a slot. The only one that is really good in is that DS version of the original Resident Evil, because the knife is on your left shoulder button, just like Resident Evil 4, and it doesn't take up an extra slot.
Okay.
So you always have it with you, and it's like, oh, that makes it so much, because you can go pop, 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 knock them down, slice, you know, and then go to the next one and really conserve some ammo.
Yeah. And one piece that I really enjoyed about here is, like Spence says, we get up to the top of the stairs and whatnot, zombies start popping out of the ground, like literally popping out of the ground, and I don't. Has that happened in these games before this? Like, do they just straight come out of graves? Because, like, I don't remember that.
The only other one, which I can't remember, when did Resident Evil 3 come out comparatively to Resident Evil Code Veronica? I'm gonna look that up real quick. But because Resident Evil 3, there is the part where you go to the graveyard and zombies pop out of the ground. And then,
that's I guess
that's the only other time I can think of it. So this one, okay, so Resident Evil 3 came out November 11th, 99, so it came out like 5 months before it. So
okay.
That would have been the one time.
Interesting.
That they did, but yeah, no, it is cool seeing that, because it's like, oh, there's actual zombies and so on like that.
Yeah,
they're coming out of the ground like you would expect from an old school like story.
Right. So I really like that. I really liked. So this is a recurrent theme throughout the rest of the game too, for that matter. In just how they can like present puzzles to you and whatnot. Because like one of the first things that happens here is like as all these zombies are coming out, there's like this truck that's like halfway smashed through a wall. And it's like on fire and whatnot, you know, and like the zombie like breaks out from the windshield essentially, you know, and then like a briefcase like falls onto the ground that's surrounded by fire, and you can't get to it yet, you know, but like that bait that the game gives you, you know, it's just like, hey, there's a thing there, you know, like go explore, you know, like this game does a really, really good job of that, with a couple of exceptions that we'll get into a little bit later that I struggled with myself, but for the most part, yeah, I think like everything's like very cut and dry and straightforward. So, well,
those are always those things, and we were talking about this, you know, before a couple days ago or something like that, but. And I've thought about this since the 90s and I've never done it, but I think about it all the time still, is that how you're supposed to play these games, and this goes with like a lot of other games, RPGs and all that kind of stuff from especially back in the day, is you're supposed to have a notepad right on the side. And every single time something like that happens, you write it down and you kind of make a note of where it is on the map and everything like that. Nobody ever does that, but, you know, that's what you're really supposed to do. And that's how you don't get like turned around and so on like that. You know, or it's like an RPG, you talk to a certain character and they kind of give you a clue and you go, okay, Bob down here said this. Okay, write this down. This is going to come in handy some point. You know, instead of just being like, just remember that. And it's like, no, you won't. You'll be looking it up on the guide before you know it. I mean, you'd be like, I remember when he mentioned that. Should have wrote that down. But no, this one's still pretty darn good about giving out stuff, because really, even though I have played the beginning of this game a lot more often, and that's kind of how a lot of Resident Evils are, especially back in the day. Sometimes you would just start them up, and you'd go for that glory run on a Friday night, and then you'd just see how far you got, and if you got kind of stuck or something like that, that might be the end of that run. But so I have played a lot of the intro of this one too, and for the most part, all the Claire stuff in the beginning, like I was just kind of going through and I was like, okay, I know where to go next. I here. I wasn't getting lost. I will say this menu or the map in this one, even though it's not as advanced as, you know, some of the newer games we played, it does kind of offer some extra things in it where sometimes where you're supposed to go next to like a door, if you have the key for it, the door will actually flash on that map.
Yeah.
I noticed that a little bit later in the run, but I was like, oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
They'll have certain dots on there too. Like if there is a key item and you go in that room and then you don't pick it up, so it leaves like a little circular yellow dot on there. I thought that was kind of neat too.
Yep. No, I enjoyed that. I liked its just general layout, like, being able to flip from like, the prison to the palace to the blah, blah, blah. That's all left-right functions, in that menu, just shifting left and right. And then if there's like variations in levels, like basement floor, first floor, second floor, whatever, that's all just up-down functions. Like that was very intuitive, like on its own. However, I struggled to read that map very well. I don't know. It's like, I don't know if the map lines were just like too thin or something like that. But like every time I would pull the map and I'm like looking at where my character is placed on the map, and then I'll go back into the scene and I'm like, okay, I'm facing this direction here. Look back at the map. Start to like rotate, and like turn and whatnot, just so I can see the cone, and what direction I need to face and all that. There's something weird about the cameras and how they move through the scenes and whatnot that was just very confusing to my brain based off trying to look at this map and like orientations and things like that. So that's where I struggled a little bit. But as soon as you start to like, really what I started to recognize is fucking doors, like door patterns, like this door is green and it has the squares in it, whereas the other door on the other side of this building, is also green, but it has triangles on it or whatever, so I started to recognize doors that way.
Yeah, they put little things in there like that to make it a little bit easier and so on. But, and the only other thing I'll say is, like, speaking of control-wise and everything like that, because of Zero's stupid controls on the HD remaster, God, that's been jacking me up. Like, and then I was playing Final Fantasy in between where, like, Final Fantasy, the controls are perfect on this one, but because I got so used to weird square being your menu button on that thing, and then now on this one, too, is I will say, and I remember on the Dreamcast, Code Veronica had kind of weird controls comparatively to the PlayStation game. Like for some reason, somebody had a bright idea, like, you know what, we should change these up a little bit. And then for some reason, they're even different on the PS2 version, which is the same across all the other ones we played. But they're not god awful, but they're just sort of strange. Like I don't know about on yours, but it was square like your action button.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's what it was on Xbox as well too. Well, the equivalent X.
Yeah. And
then so runs X, which that's kind of fine, but it is kind of weird that. But then your cancel buttons B.
No, mine. No, so mine's. What was mine? I guess. Yeah. So holding circle was my run button.
Okay.
X to interact. That was square.
Okay, so yeah, you had it that way.
Okay. Yeah.
Because there was, I saw that in there. You could flip to that one as one of the other options and so on like that. And then they also had like, kind of like Nintendo style controls where circle or like Japanese style, because circle's supposed to mean yes and X is supposed to mean no.
Right.
In Japan.
Yeah.
But and then I think it's like triangle was map, which instead of being your like options, but instead or your menu. Then menu was start.
Yep.
Yeah, so it was a little bit clustered, and it's like I don't know where some people just get this great idea, and then for some reason they'll give you 5 options of alternative controls, and none of them are just the original controls. It's like, why can't the original controls just be one of the options?
Well, the isn't the Dreamcast controller delinquent 2 trigger buttons? Like, does it only have 2 instead of 4?
The Dreamcast controller only has technically 6 action buttons and only 1 start thing. That's kind of the weird thing about the Dreamcast is I felt that's if there's a couple small things that kind of like once again I think holds the Dreamcast back from being able to compete with PS2 and GameCube and Xbox. It didn't have 2 joysticks. It didn't have 4 trigger buttons or shoulder buttons and it didn't have a select button. Like I feel like all those things there, and in a sense too, the other one you couldn't press the joysticks in. Now, granted, the GameCube one you couldn't either, but and the GameCube one I guess only had Z, not ZL or whatever.
That's true. Yeah, that's
so
true.
It was missing a little bit there too, because I remember there's a lot of games when you got to like Splinter Cell and so on like that. You just held Z down, and then all the other buttons did something different. So there was a few of those games like that where they had to make up for all the like missed buttons.
Yeah.
But no, the Dreamcast in general just had like they like alternative. Changed up the controls a little bit on Resident Evil. Once again, not the worst thing, but because we played Zero beforehand, boy, that's still.
Oh yeah.
I would still keep clicking the wrong buttons all the time, But
Well, I really enjoyed like doing 0 to Code Veronica back to back. Like as unintentional as that was, like it was actually a really cool thing to see, like a game developed in like, 2001, 2-ish, as comparatively to something that was being developed in 98, 99-ish, I imagine. And how similar, but how different they are, in just core things, like, frankly, I wish that this game had the feature to drop an item on the ground. Like, I wish that was a thing here, there was multiple times where I would get into a full stash or a full inventory situation, and it's just like, I want this key item, but I don't want to burn my herb right now, and it's like, do I run all the way back to my stash, where there's like 3 boxes in this whole freaking game, like, do I run all the way back there to go drop the shit off just to come back and get the key item, just to run all the way back? Or do I I'm already full health and just eat the green herb, like, I mean, God, like that was frustrating, like, to an extent. But at the same time, like, people didn't know about, item dropping, that came with Resident Evil 0, so anyways. Yeah.
Though strangely, if you think about it, Code Veronica 3 and 0, if you think about 0 on the N64, are all kind of developed in the same time period.
Right.
0 just kind of came out the latest, 3 came out the earliest, but no, there is some of those things like that, and the boxes, and especially like in that Claire file, it's like they're not close to each other whatsoever. They are kind of few and far between, and the upside, though, is this game does give you 8 slots once you get that side pack, but you get that pretty darn early. And both Claire and Chris get it, because I couldn't remember if Claire grabs it, Chris doesn't get it. I'm like, well, wait a second, that's Resident Evil 2. Yeah. Sometimes your Resident Evil logic from different games gets confused and the wires get twisted. The one thing I think when speaking of 0 is probably the biggest complaint I have in that one is you get things like the shotgun and the hook shot and all that stuff, and they take up 2 slots. And especially with the shotgun, for the fact it takes up 2 slots, same with the grenade launcher. Then you got to carry the ammo with it too, so now that's 3 slots.
Right.
Code Veronica introduced the 2-slot guns, but the only ones that are 2 slots are when you have double pistols or double machine guns. And the nice thing about them is they have percentages on them, so you're not carrying around any extra ammo. Right. So they make very logical sense why it's 2. It's like, well, you have 2 guns and the ammo's included. Right. So it saves on your inventory space.
Yeah, and I thought that was really interesting too, to have a weapon that is percentage based off the amount of ammo that's in there. So like you take, it starts off 100%, you take a couple rounds off, now it's 94%, and it's like, and trying to like, clock that out, because like I heavily use that, an example that goes against that two weapon thing is like the AK, for example. Like, so an AK-47 that you pick up later on in the game as Claire is a 2-slot weapon, but similar, it has a percentage bar in there, so all the ammo's there. And like trying to like figure out in the boss fight that I use that on, like, do I just hold the button down and just pop, 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 or do I just go pop, 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 like individual fire or whatever? What's more effective? And like getting to play, like dying in that fight and then going back and then going to single fire and all that. And having weapons where your ammo is like included, into the inventory slot was like very tasteful. It's like, thank you developers for thinking of that, because otherwise, it'd be too much.
No, and that's a cool thing. And even right away, you get those, because, Claire finally gets a pistol, right? Only a couple screens past where those zombies first appeared. And you're introduced to our other character in here, Steve Burnside, who's our Leonardo DiCaprio looking fella who's got some, Canadian attitude and so on like that. And he's just like, oh, I thought you were a zombie. My bad.
He literally sounds just like that. Sorry about that.
Sorry about that, Claire. Steve's he's an interesting character. If he didn't pass away at the end of this game, you'd be one of those ones. He's not like a Billy where you're like, man, I'd like to see him back in the game.
Yeah.
Steve's one of those ones. He's not bad enough that you're like, God, this guy brings the game down. Yeah. But he's just like that point where you're like, kind of an annoying kid.
Yeah.
Let's be honest here.
Yep. Yeah, because I assume he's around the same age as Claire in this game, because I think Claire's like 19, 20.
Claire's 19, and I looked at this right when I beat the game because I was looking at the battle game and they had the stats, and so Steve's 17, so he's just a little bit younger.
Oh, okay. All right.
but around the same age, and he's been sent here too, in prison and whatnot. We'll learn later on like how he got here and why he's here and all that stuff. But he's pretty much like the only other live survivor other than the prison guard dude and so on. So we're just running through. We're battling zombies. We get dogs and all kinds of stuff. Which I will say, I don't think I shot a single dog in this game for some reason.
No, you didn't?
Like I just kept running past them. I was like, I'm just gonna see if I can run past them every single time. And for the most part, I did. Even though sometimes those dogs, they would get you right when you came down the stairs. They would be right on you, like, dude, you stupid dog. Like, what the hell?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and especially in those animations that you can't control, going up and downstairs and whatnot, because like your character's basically invincible. She can't get hit, until you take control, and then that's when the thing's gonna grab you. That's when it's gonna bite you. I ran into that a lot in this game.
Well, then I forget too is that this game is the first one too where the enemies can go up the stairs, because that was always a safety feature in like Resident Evil 2. No, I think in 3 they could actually go up the stairs too.
Yeah.
Because 3 was the one that I don't think you actually had to press something to go up the stairs. Maybe you could just run straight up them.
I don't recall.
It's been a moment on that one. But in this one too, because I remember like I got up the stairs once. I'm like, stupid dogs, and the dog jumped up the stairs. I was like, oh, never mind.
Yep.
See ya.
Yep.
And then of course the zombies can lumber up the stairs and everything too, and you see them coming. Which I wonder what happens if the zombie's going up the stairs and you click to go down, says it locks you into it. I wonder if you just like plow through them. It'd be a good question to see like how that works physics wise.
Yep. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. I've never.
Can he bite you on the stairs? I can't imagine that. I don't think the game's designed to have an animation for that.
The game just crashes. It's just like nope.
Yeah. So, but yeah, as you said, you're running around. You're kind of in this like training facility area, and then this one too. The interesting thing is if Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3 has that Japanese Americana look to it. This one's got the Japanese European look to everything because you're on pretty much the Euro side of the Umbrella Research stuff.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the neat thing here is you're seeing the other part of Umbrella and their other base, the Ashfords one, because back in ye old mountain climbing days after World War II, it was the 3 of them that we learned from Resident Evil 8. Marcus, I guess you learned in Resident Evil 0 technically, but Marcus, Spencer, and Ashford Senior or whatever, Grandpa, all 3 of those guys discovered the mother virus out there, which later turns out to be from Lady D or whatever.
Yep.
Or no, not Lady D, from
8, Miranda.
Miranda, yeah. But from 8, if you want to go with that one's logic, and so on. But they're the ones that kind of did that, and so each person kind of went back to their own areas and kind of worked on their own thing. Marcus did the leeches for 0, the regular virus became the T virus, and so on like that, creating Tyrant and all that stuff, and the Hunters. And then down here, they've been working on something similar too, so they got the T virus and all that stuff, but it's being worked on, as we learn later, to become the T Veronica virus.
Yep, another mutation. And the Ashfords are so fucking cool. The background behind, the actual character that we run across is something else, dude. But the story behind the Ashfords and how they came to be and who, these people are and all that, such a cool story, dude.
I think so. I like it because I just like the creepiness of them. Is that they're just these really rich, privileged kids. Yeah. And there's that one part where you just run across that very first film thing, and it shows like the 2 Ashford kids that like give or take age 10 and whatnot, and they're just sitting there and they're like pulling like the wings off of a dragonfly and feeding it to their ants, and then they just creepily look at each other like it just looks like these 2. You're like, oh, those 2 kids, those brother and sisters fuck each other. We just know that.
Oh yeah.
That's how weird they fucking are.
Yep. Yep. There's definitely something incesty going on between that. It's the not good.
They're those old school aristocratic lords and lordesses and all that kind of stuff where like they keep it in the bloodline type thing.
Yep. And that's what's like really, really heavy on this particular story with the Ashfords and whatnot is like it's so much about genetics and making the pristine human and the blah blah blah, and it's so similar to everything that you've seen within Umbrella leading up to this point or whatnot too, but it's so hyper specific about the bloodline. And it's funny because like I did some post and research, and if you actually look at what's the male's character's name, the antagonist,
Alexander.
Is it Alexander?
Is Alexander the grandpa? I can't remember. God, I
can't.
just totally drew a blank on their names.
anyways, the male guy that we run across in this game and whatnot. God damn, what the hell's his name? That's gonna bug
because it's Alexia and Alfred.
Alfred.
That's right. I think Alexander. They all have stupid A names.
yeah. Well, that's what gets confusing,
because they all have A names, and that's why you see like the logos, like the two A's kind of right next to each other. Alexander, I think, is Grandpa, and then Alexia and Alfred.
Yeah. That's right. I forgot what I was trying to say about him, but anyways, very, very goofy character, man. That's what I was going to say is in post and research. So being that this game has like very heavy, like needs to create more or less the perfect human. The original design of that character was very Nazi-esque. Like the like clothes that he was wearing, like he was in like a black, like outfit with like red shit on his shoulder. It wasn't like straight up a Nazi symbol, but like, stuff like that. It's very apparent, like the original design of this character, like what they were trying to mirror and whatnot. And because of, those recognitions of what they were trying to do, I guess that they decided to revert over to like, let's make this guy way more British and make him look like the redcoats and the blah, 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 like, so they completely changed his design based off that, I guess. So I just thought it was interesting.
Those always feel like those ideas in Japan where they're like, what's wrong with this? Like,
right.
And I think somebody in like, the US of Capcom's like, whoa, hold on a second.
Yeah.
Pump the brakes on that idea real quick.
Yep.
Because I think in Japan sometimes they just go, whatever.
Yeah.
Those things I think just go right over their heads when they're just like, that just was a cool character design.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you see that in a lot of animes where like they like really have like that like neo-fascist like Nazi kind of look to some things and stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, it makes for a cool looking anime. Like,
yeah. No,
look at those robots. Aren't those badass?
Yeah. No, I mean this dude like straight up looks like something out of Wolfenstein, like in his original design. It's really interesting. So
yeah, I wonder if you could see that there too, like the two, because they are blonde haired. They're like, those like poster boy childs, for that. Yep. And you have this dude here, and he's running around, and of course he's not helpful to anybody here. He just locks himself away and lets that virus just roll and whatnot like that, not helping anybody. So you see some of those notes that you see from just like the employees and so on like that, like, screw that guy, man, he just didn't do anything for us, A big old weenie hiding up in his castle up there.
Yep. Yeah, and that exact thing too, castle. This like it's funny to like look at something like Resident Evil 4, where you do have like a straight up castle setting, and like everything's like cobblestone and this, that, and the other. And to see it, like here all those years prior and whatnot, because like I'm trying to think like between 1, 2, and 3, like outside of the mansion, I really don't remember like castles,
No, because they're all in America, so it's like everything's very like city and mansion-y, and everything kind of has, in a sense, that Japanese Americana look.
Right, yeah. But I really like that, and how funny too, because like I was trying to make the connection in my own head too of like, so in RE0 that we literally just played, like we go to a training facility at one point, and there's a whole area here called the training facility, and I'm like, is it the same? It can't be the same place because we're on an island. Like what? But in general, the fact that Umbrella exists and is that far expansive and has all these training facilities, multiples of them and stuff like that. Yeah, that was pretty interesting. So again, just doing direct ties to RE0, like the entire playthrough, like it was really cool.
Yeah, exactly. Because as you're running through and so on, and in this one too, you start to see they have the new creatures and stuff you run across. They got these things called like a Bandersnatch, which is almost this like blob looking monster thing with a real stretchy like right arm and everything. And the first time you see it is you actually run into like, there's a scientist dude and he like comes up to the window and he's like, get me out of here. And Claire's like, I can't open the lock. And then he just like, and his head gets smashed through the window. Blood splats everywhere. You don't see anything, but you just see this like hand just like collapse him there, And there's a real important painting in the background here too that becomes a very, very, necessary puzzle piece later down the line. Yep. But Claire has to book it out of this room because there's like gas and everything like that. But that's kind of the first thing you see of it, because Resident Evil is always good about, you generally always have like a moment where there's like a cutscene where you're going to see a new enemy, and then you a lot of times pick up a note that just starts talking about it, and then you'll eventually run into it. So it's like you get this build up and lead into. They never just straight surprise you with one of these things unless for some reason you skip something.
Yeah, and these Bandersnatches too, man, because like, you know, the first fight that you have against one, like I didn't remember these enemies from the 20 years ago when I last played this, you know, and you know, yet again another example of like a boss, you know, or a mini boss, whatever you want to call it, you know, like turning into like a regular enemy and whatnot, you know, because like these things are. There's not a ton of them in the game, but where they do exist, like they're the biggest pain in the ass. They're big, like they almost remind me of like trying to think of like what a good comparison. Like it almost looks like a design that would come out of like Nickelodeon or something. Like, you know, like the way that, and again, it could have just been like, you know, the screen that I was playing on and how bright it was, but they kind of look like a fucking banana that like has veins coming out of it. You know, like I mean, they're like this like really weird like green orange or like green yellowish, you know, like skin tone colors and all that, but they have like, you know, these abilities of like long stretchy arms and stuff, you know, and like just continually getting hit by these things, like continually. I didn't want to fight a ton of them throughout the game, you know, because like a lot of them just exist like in a pass-through hallway or like a pass-through room, you know, where you just like enter in one door, run across the room, hit the other door and leave, you know? So in a lot of those situations, it's just like, if I get hit once, you know, like what's another, you know, green herb, you know, like later on, you know, or whatever. So I don't know. I'm super mixed on this enemy, but in general, like they look goofy as hell, you know, like they're really funny looking.
Well, this is one of those weird ones too. They don't appear in any other Resident Evil game. This is the only one that they're in. And I think that's probably why you probably don't remember them as much, because you just never saw them again. They're not like hunters that appear in multiple Resident Evil games or even lickers that appear in multiple ones. These ones are totally unique to Code Veronica. And for the most part, that's what I kind of did too. I killed a few that you had to kill pretty much to get through. And then a lot of the other ones, I kind of just want to do a test. I'm like, can I just run past all these guys? And for the most part, every once in a while you'd get either slapped or, if worst cases, you did get caught by one of them if you kind of did. And it grabs Claire and holds her up and he's like, God damn it.
Oh, see, I never got grabbed that one.
Oh, you did it? If you kind of like, if you kind of bump into them and they kind of grab you right up close, they'll pick you up and hold you above. And that's the only time where you go, I probably should have killed that one. But too late now. We've gone too far. You know. But it is kind of interesting. They only really appear in that training grounds area, and they don't come anywhere else later in the game. And there's maybe like 10 of them in total. And this game does give you kind of enough ammo that if you want, you can close enough kill almost everything. For me, I'm always so used to in Resident Evil like trying to conserve that ammo, and then of course always when I get to the end of the game, I mostly have way more ammo than I ever needed. You know, and I should have used that gun a little bit more often. You know, the worst one's like when you get to the end of the game, you got like 25 rounds of Magnum, and you're like, ending boss takes 6 shots with it. And you're like, cool.
Oh, dude, we'll get to it, but yes, exactly that.
I screwed up and forgot to bring the fire extinguisher with me, so I didn't even have the Magnum at the end. I didn't even get the AK. I actually missed that one as well too. I missed a bunch of guns. So if I had the ammo,
you got that ammo.
It's like I had a lot of bowgun ammo too that I never got to use, But yeah, so you do, it goes to show you do have enough ammo, even if you do forget a bunch of guns, that you can get by. But the other interesting thing I'm going to say this too, I know we're kind of like halfway in the story, but then also that another neat feature in this game is it only has one difficulty in it. But the way that it sort of feels is it only has one difficulty and it only has one kind of playthrough. It's not like a Leon and Claire or a Jill and Chris type thing. Is it almost feels like the structure goes like Claire is almost like the normal mode. And then once you get to Chris, it's almost like you're playing the game again on hard mode, but everything's kind of alternative now. You're running through the same areas, but now he's got different places to go. There's some new rooms and so on, some new enemies. But it almost feels like that's there, but it's all built into one playthrough. It's almost like the normal and the hard. Like, so if you beat the game as Claire, you went back and played Chris next and played it on hard, but instead it's just one long story, you know? And at this time period, this game was way longer than 1, 2, and 3. Like, that was kind of the big thing about Code Veronica is like, wow, it's a long game, you know?
Yep. Yeah, no, exactly all that. Yeah, this game, like, it actually really surprised me how long this took, and like how relatively short in days I played this, but like the hour mark at the end of it, I was like, holy shit, like it took me that long, like goddamn, you know, it's deceptively long. But I also think it's like there's a lot of there's a lot of backtracking in this game, like a ton of backtracking, whether it's intentional or not, you know, like on the player's end, you know. I did a lot of unintentional backtracking here just because, again, I need to get through the red door, but I went through the red door with the circles on it instead of the red door with the square. So, you know, and I ended up in a different area, and I'm like, fuck, where am I? Looking at that map, getting confused, you know, going, fuck, okay. I went through that door. I go through this door. Okay, now I know where I'm at. Now I go through that red door with the squares. You know, like lots of that back and forth for me. So,
yeah, no, it does have that. I mean, that's just classic Resident Evil in general. Until like you have it kind of really down pat, you know, or you just go, oh, I forgot that item. Let me go back and grab that item out of the item box. You know, there's always that kind of stuff. Yep. One that was like when there was that red skeleton, like. Picture, which I knew was in that room, but I could not remember how to exactly get back into that room. Yep. To get it, so you get the code and put it up on the wall and all that kind of stuff. So I would probably run around for half an hour trying to figure that one out. Yep. You know, and once I finally did, it's like, oh yeah, and it's actually kind of a neat one because you actually go into this one room, you look at the security camera, and you kind of zoom around, and you zoom up close to the portrait, and you go, oh, there's a number on the bottom there, and so on. And then you're able to take the gas out and so on, grab the, you know, the painting and yada yada yada, get that going. But beyond some of that stuff, once again, the game still leads you pretty darn decently. Other than that, you at least can still store a decent amount of items and so on. And as you're running through these different environments, you know, you go from that training facility, you know, kind of almost like this blue collar kind of area where there's like this construction crews you're battling and all kinds of those zombies, to weird torture like stuff. There's like, you know, a guillotine and all that kind of thing.
Yeah. And again, when I mentioned early on this episode, like there's like some wacky ass shit in this game. Like there's some wacky ass shit in this game that's just like, okay, because yeah, you do go from fighting the dudes with the hard hats and the safety vests on to, you know, running past the dudes and like standing next to the guillotine, and it's like,
yeah, it's like all in the same kind of area too.
Yeah,
you know. So you go through there and so on. Then you get to like this palace-looking section, which of course leads to the Ashford's like castle thing on top.
Yep.
And then you're finally introduced to Alfred Ashford and so on. He's tried sniping you a couple times, and then once you finally get see him there, he's just this kind of wacky British dude, you know. But it's almost kind of creepy what makes it, because he's just like, oh, who is this guy? He just seems like a pansy, you know, running around just being a dick to everybody.
Yep.
And lo and behold, then you start running it. You finally get that palace area, and you go, oh, there's the sister. There's Alexia. And you're like spying through and everything like that. And next thing you know, it runs off, you know, and you're like, okay, where the heck did it go? And then you see there's a wig sitting there, and you're like, fuck is this? You know, and at some point it gets, you know, through some of these story things, you learn that, well, Alfred's just been dressing up as his sister as well, too, and running back and forth, you know, doing things here, really kind of creeping people out. in the old school way that, like, you know, like I always feel like there's that thing for like old villains in both horror and action movies and so on like that, where they're either disfigured or there's just something different about them. Like that's kind of what adds to some of their scariness. You think of like a lot of old Bond movies and stuff like that. Guy will be missing his hand or something like that. You know, something else will be kind of disfigured with him or something like that. And in this one here, it's like, well, it's a cross-dressing thing is what it is here. At a time period, we're like, oh, that's kind of creepy.
Yeah.
Because that's how it's sold. Is almost that's like that thing you see. It's like it's almost like that's part of supposed to be the weirdness of it, which does make me wonder what. Because nowadays, if you kind of came out with this, and there's a line that's, I laughed so hard I had to write it down, because literally we're a little bit farther than this too, but like Claire's like leaving off the island, and she literally yells at us like, "You cross-dressing freak!"
Yeah, I know.
In 2000s. Normal. Nothing like that now. But there's nowadays, that's, oh boy, you know what I mean? Next thing you know, people aren't going to buy your Harry Potter books if you say something like that.
I know. So this whole time, dude, like, so we've been doing this podcast for a little over a year and whatnot. We've been talking about remakes forever, you know, like what makes a good remake and blah, blah, blah. I have had it in my head for a long time that Code Veronica should probably get a remake. Code Veronica should totally get a remake and blah, blah, blah. Well, here I am a year later actually playing the fucking thing, and I get to these sections and I'm like, they can't. They just can't. You know, like they can't. Yeah. Like they would have to.
It's either that
the totality of this fucking game.
Yeah, you would just have to pull that back a little bit on the Ashford stuff, and I almost kind of wonder because there is a somewhat remake of this game on the Resident Evil: The Dark Side Chronicles. Now, granted, it's a light gun game on the Wii, but the cool thing about that one is that they remade 2 and 3 in modern graphics of the time. You know, so it looks really good, but it's got the whole. You go through the whole story. It's almost like playing Resident Evil if you wanted to play through the story, but you didn't really want to go through the whole hassle of playing the game. That's why I always think makes those Chronicles ones really neat. But I know Claire has that line in that game. Because I don't know, I was laughing so hard. Just he's so angry, chill.
I know.
I'd be pissed too because this guy's just been dicking with you the whole time and so on like that. It's okay. Claire's from a Midwestern town. If she's back east, that's a normal phrase to be said.
No, exactly. And he's just like, dude, he's such an awful shot too. Like he has so many opportunities to kill Claire. Like there's so many opportunities where like his laser's like on her head, and it's just like, just pull the fuck. You know, she's looking the other way. What are you doing? You know. But.
Well, it's like there's like a note you find way later on, and I think it's from Alexander Ashford, and he's talking about his 2 grandkids. He's like, there's Alfred there, and yes, he is, you know, smart enough and so on like that, but something's missing. Let's be honest. I don't know what's wrong with him, but you know. He's a little short in some departments. On the other hand, though, Alexia, my God, now is that the dream child? The dream child, smartest thing on you've ever seen, you know. You know, blonde hair, pure beauty. Okay, let's see here, Alexander. Start.
Yep. It's so funny.
You know, so even though Alfred is generally pretty intelligent, stuff like that, he still is second-class citizen compared to how his sister was the prize child. You know, even so much so that he's oddly too obsessed with her. You know. Yep. But we have that. The other big story thing we kind of have going on here, and this is something that's actually in Code Veronica X and not in the Dreamcast one, where like the start of it is. There's more of these. Is Wesker shows up, and there's a scene where she is at the palace and he's talking to Claire, and that's a bonus one I remember that's not the Dreamcast one, because I almost want to say you don't see Wesker till you're like playing as Chris. I almost don't think you see him as Claire in the Dreamcast version. Right.
Yeah. So again, I haven't played the Dreamcast version, but I was reading that is a core difference between the original and X. Is that Wesker's involvement in the original Code Veronica, he just like literally like comes out of nowhere, you know, and like there was a lot of words about that in old forums and whatnot about just like, you know, like why, you know, like how did he get here, you know, like things like that. So
yeah, once they had some more disk space, probably because that's that thing is that they wanted to do that. Well, makes me wonder what they did with because Code Veronica X once again is on Dreamcast in Japan, you know, and I know that was the big thing back in the day is that people would import that game so that they could see those extra cutscenes before the PS2 one came out, you know. So it must still fit on there because it's only an extra like 10 minutes, but that's the whole thing about CDs is it's those cutscenes. And the music is the thing that takes up all the data. Like mostly, if you minus those 2 things out and you just go like gameplay wise, it's like that's 100 megabytes.
Oh yeah. That's
exactly. Always the funniest thing about it. Once you minus the music and like the pre-rendered like cutscenes, nothing. It's like Final Fantasy 4 discs. You took out the cutscenes and the music, or at least just maybe made the music MIDI. It could fit on an N64 cart.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
So it's one of those ones, but so yeah, you do get Wesker in a little bit earlier scenes here talking to Claire. Even though I will kind of say I was kind of thinking about it. There is something kind of to be said that you're going through this whole game, and then all of a sudden Wesker does come out of kind of nowhere. It is kind of a weird, like, whoa, I didn't expect that kind of thing. Yeah. You know, where like it builds up. I don't know. It works both ways, I'll say. But
yeah, I'd be curious for like. Because again, like I can imagine that a lot of kids in, you know, that Christmas of 2000 or whatever, 99, got this console. Be really curious if any of those new 2 Dreamcast players ever had, you know, Resident Evil prior to this, whether they had a PlayStation or, like you said, like, you know, the RE1 version of Saturn or whatever. I'd be so curious to like see what they thought about Wesker not having context of the man, you know, like if imagine like this is your first Resident Evil game, you know, like, you know, like through that lens, like that would.
Yeah, I think you would be a little bit confused because of how sequel this one is. You know, because once again, I think this one is like it makes for the perfect trilogy of the 1, 2, and 3. This game goes so well into there. You know, because even if you pull Resident Evil 3's context storyline out of it, it doesn't affect this trilogy in a sense. The big thing that 3 kind of adds to it more than anything else is that Raccoon City gets nuked. You know, because I can't remember if that. No, that does happen in 2 though, doesn't it? Do you still see that in 2? I don't think so, because I want to say because 3 is kind of like that one. It starts before 2 and it ends after 2, so 2 takes place in between 3 in a sense.
Yeah, I think so.
A weird thing like that, but yeah, I can't remember exactly. Sometimes those things all start to run together after a while, but whatever. As a perfect trilogy, Code Veronica does carry that on there, and the fact that you do kind of have Wesker there, and so on. So as you're going here, you finally get to you find this like little cool sub area and whatnot. It's got a seaplane down below. You know, you got to get Steve to give up his gold Lugers and so on. He's like, "Oh, these are awesome, Claire." He's like, and of course he's like, "Well, if you find me something automatic, maybe I'll give them to you." You're like, that little son of a bitch.
Yeah, seriously. And then he just runs off.
Yeah, you know. So he goes off, but then you finally do find those Uzis, and that's where I think you see the first Bandersnatch, and you have to kill it and so on like that. And you get these Uzis and you trade it to Steve. And of course, he's pissed at first because you didn't give him ammo. You're like, "Oh, it was an unfair deal, Claire." Fucking bitch. You know, and she's like, "No, Steve, shut up. There's some ammo up there. You can go up there and get it." And then you play as Steve for a little brief moment. You get those Uzis and you get to blast away some zombies just for the hell of it. And so on. And then it comes up to finally like, well, I think you might find some of these files beforehand, because you do find a file that kind of, you could tell it's Steve. And you know, it's almost like there was this boy and his father were brought here to Rockford Island. And the story behind it was that, you know, I think the dad worked for Umbrella and so on like that. And I think he either gave out some like information or something like that. And they're like, "We're not having that." So they came by to arrest the dad. And in the process, he sort of resisted, so they shot the mom. And Steve is now resentful against his father because of that. And they're like, "We'll bring the boy anyways." So they bring the boy and they bring Steve's dad to Rockford Island because of his dad's treachery and treason. And lo and behold, here's, you know, Steve, and now he's Silver's. He's like, "This is the only thing that I could trust is Uzis. They don't let you down. You know, that's a real father." And Claire's like, "Really? You trust the Uzis more than people, Steve?" And he's like, "Yeah, what of it?"
Yeah, no, he's just so, dude. This guy's got some daddy issues, bro. Like that freaking scene, man, of him like finally like coming across his father. You know, like, oh my god, and he's just like he's standing there with both of his Uzis, like just facing his father. You know, just frozen. You know, just like Dad.
And his dad turns into a big old zombie. He comes like lurking towards him and so on. And then just Steve goes, he's like, "Father." I just remember because RJ back in the day used to like really act that scene out, like legitimately, like if he was doing Resident Evil Code Veronica for theater.
Oh, I know. And this was around the time that I started texting you about like, dude, like I'm seeing, because I'm like in process of playing Final Fantasy X on PS2 right now as well, you know, like, and a lot of like the over dramatic, because like, you know, like this is a DVD that can add a ton of like audio and, you know, more motion video and blah blah blah. You know, this is a more advanced, this is a next gen title, and like that mentality has bled over into so many different games. You know, like Metal Gear Solid 2 is this way. You know, Final Fantasy X is this way. This game's like this and all that. You know, and it's just like so over the top. You know, acting and just slow motion gunfire. You know, pop pop pop. You know, like it's nuts, dude.
Well, it's that mix of like you have the John Woo, you know, filmmaking influence that's in like a lot of stuff, especially late '90s, early 2000s. I mean, everything from The Matrix to Max Payne to this game here. You got some John Woo there. Of course, you have the anime-ness, because that's generally how these cutscenes are made, and that's what I feel is kind of missing in a lot of Japanese games nowadays, is because they've almost like diluted that anime stuff out of them, you know, which kind of makes me feel like that's the one thing about the RE engine that bothers me, is it doesn't look Japanese anymore, and I feel like it doesn't feel like Resident Evil the same way that these other ones do. But then you also have, because it's anime, so what's the anime thing for America? You have Canadians doing the dubbing, because that was like in the the 80s and 90s, it was like only Canadians did the dubbing and so on like that. So you always have sort of this goofy, it's not really American, but somebody's doing it. You can always tell because everybody says sorry. Sorry. Even Chris says it. Sorry, Claire.
No, I know.
So you got the weird Canadian dubbing that, like, strangely enough, I kind of still like, so it's maybe not like perfect, but it just kind of adds to it, the charm and whatnot. So, though at the same time, it is still a step up from like the games in like the 90s and some of their dubbing. So
yeah. So one comment that I'll toss at this too. So this is the very first time, well, not very first time, but this is the first time in a very long time that I played through an entire video game without captions on, because I don't think there's even an option for that in this game.
No, I'm glad there's not, because I can't stand captions in video games.
And I know that, but I forever have always played with captions on and whatnot. What's really funny is like how much more I got into every individual cutscene and things like that because there aren't captions, because I'm not reading, like I'm paying attention to the scene and whatnot. However, this game has a really weird, and I don't know if it's the PS2 version, I don't know if this is just the game in general or whatever, but its audio balancing is really off. Like Wesker, for example, sounds like, he's like talking through the thing. Like, it's like, it's so muffled because like the environmental noise that's going on, the rain that's falling down around him, the slight amount of audio that's like playing the music, to like pump up the scene and whatnot. You can't hear shit in this game. Like you can't hear audio, like vocal audio, it's really tough. So unfortunately what that meant, which is fortunate for the podcast, is like I got to go back and rewatch a ton of these cutscenes just to see what they were saying. Because a lot of the times I just physically couldn't hear what the hell they were saying, So, anyways, that's just one brief comment, and I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I wonder if, because sometimes even if your TV is just in a different balance on its audio settings and so on like that, because that's like sometimes the downfall. Like, is your stereo working properly on there? Because I learned that a long time ago as a kid. That was like one of those like revelations. Like, oh, you want to make sure that if you don't have, like, say if you have one of those TVs, like the cheaper TVs that you can't plug in like the stereo, you want to make sure you have a plug that balances that out, or you turn it to mono, or it really jacks up the audio.
Oh yeah, no, this is because this is like a really like high end Toshiba, of that era and whatnot. So it's got like a crazy audio system to it. Okay, it sounds great, like on pretty much everything else.
Just
like
Code Veronica.
It was just this game, like for whatever reason I just couldn't understand what the hell people were saying. So again, it just sounded like an audio balance thing. It was just really weird.
You want to know what's another, speaking of just Resident Evil and their audio dubbing and everything like that, I think this is an interesting factoid, but I remember back in the day I got the Japanese version of the Saturn one because I was like, well, I want to play through Resident Evil 1 again, but I want to see what it's like in Japanese and so on like that, and see how that experience is. Well, Japan never had a Japanese dub on a Resident Evil till Resident Evil 6.
Oh, shit, really?
Isn't that weird? Yeah, they always just kept it in English and put Japanese subtitles on it.
Interesting.
Because they wanted it to feel like an American movie. That was like the thought process behind it there. Well, and it makes sense. If you watch an American movie in Japan, it has subtitles. Just like if we watch like a Hong Kong or a Japanese movie, if you want to watch it right, you watch it with subtitles. Yeah,
that's really
so that's the experience they wanted. But I thought that was so weird because I don't know, it didn't cross my mind that's like, oh, there isn't like Japanese audio or anything like that. Yeah. Because if you play like Resident Evil in Japanese, it's like the menus are in Japanese, and then it has subtitles, and that's it. The game is pretty much identical.
That's interesting. Wow. Yeah, I didn't know that.
So it's weird because it's like, so if you play Code Veronica in Japan, all those
still the English version.
It's still the English version. Yeah, it's like, so it kind of made sense that you could import this game. And it probably, especially if you played through it once already, and then you get Code Veronica X for your Dreamcast, it probably wasn't the hardest thing, because you kind of knew what the items were and everything like that. Of course, you couldn't read the documents probably, but beyond that.
Well, like I mean, most people like even pick up. So it's notable in a lot of video games for speedrunning. It is the topic I'm on, but like for speedrunning, like a lot of video games, the Japanese versions notably are faster because the text is a lot faster, than English.
I didn't think about that. Yeah, because
just based off characters and whatever, like so. I almost guarantee that like there's probably a speedrunner group out there that has original Dreamcast hardware, the Japanese version specific for that, because text was probably faster or whatever. So it's just super common, the things that I've seen.
Well, and the one thing that's always cool about the Dreamcast is that's like one of the original systems that you can literally just pop any disc in there and it works. It's, you know, you don't need a mod chip. You don't need all that extra stuff like you need for PlayStation and Saturn. You could just literally go, yeah, put the disc in there.
Yep.
There you go.
Yep.
But yeah, so as Resident Evil goes on, you kind of get through there. You get through the training facility as Claire, and you get this, you know, Steve sees his, you know, father die, or he kills himself, and he has an emotional moment. And you kind of keep going. Finally, you get those Lugers back from him so you can open up some doors and so on like that.
Yep.
But what you're trying to do is get off this island, and you get this plane started and everything like that. And even at this point, it almost kind of has that feeling like you're at the end of the game. Like just the way it is from prior Resident Evil knowledge. The nuclear bomb sirens are going off. The alarm's going. There's the countdown timer. You have to run through, put all the stuff together, you know, and this tyrant pops out because, you know, Alfred releases it and so on. So you're getting this boss battle. You kind of knock him out of the way so you can run past him. I tried running past him. You can't run past him.
Yeah.
You have to shoot him down right there at that first one. And lo and behold, you go through all the loops and everything like that, and you get this plane, get the shutters open, and you take on off. And then you kind of have this epic battle in the back there where Tyrant somehow, some way gets on the plane. And I remember you were talking to me about this before we started this one. You were afraid that you were going to get soft locked here. And I was like, so I'm like, I mean, unless you just didn't have any ammo or anything like that, I was trying to think of like how you could soft lock yourself in this game and whatnot that would make this thing like not work, you know?
And that's ultimately it. So I mentioned at the start of this episode that I have played Code Veronica or at least half of this game many times. And a lot of the times you got to remember I was 10, 11-ish, you know, years old. I didn't understand what I know now, you know. So in this fight, you know, like it basically like you jump onto a plane, and when you're in the air in this plane, you're like in the cockpit of the plane is a playable area. And the only other area you can go to at this point is the boss room. You can save right there, you know, and whatnot, which frankly, like was the mistake at that time, you know, was like making the save right there. And not having enough ammo, you know. I didn't have enough explosive tips for the crossbow. I didn't have enough pistol rounds. I didn't have all this stuff. What I didn't know at that time that I have now gained knowledge of is that in this tyrant fight, like you don't have to shoot him once. There's a mechanic in the fight where you like pull a lever and this like giant box, you know, like unlatches from the floor or whatever, slides down the plane, you know, hits the tyrant and can knock him out of the plane. It's more proficient to damage him because if you damage him enough, you know, like eventually that cutscene will play where the box finally knocks him out of the plane because you got to do this mechanic regardless. But what I've learned now is like, yeah, again, you don't have to damage him whatsoever. You just have to pull that lever 6 fucking times, you know?
Yeah, and that thing takes forever to recharge.
Yes.
It's like one of those ones. It probably only takes 30 seconds, but when you're stuck up there with Tyrant and everything like that, it feels like a minute and a half each time you do it. And you're like, okay, try to run around him and not get hit. I remember the very first time when me and RJ finally got to that part, we got up there and we ran out of ammo, but I had the knife. And I remember just going around, and I remember there was one last hit I got on Tyrant, and I slashed like his butt with the knife, and you saw like the little blood shoot out, and then like the crate came and hit him, and it was like he flew out. I was like, oh, good that we got that ass shot. That was how we got rid of him.
Yeah.
So lo and behold, it was kind of possible. But I was thinking about that because the whole way through this game, I was trying to think of like, is there things that you can do to soft lock yourself out of there? I mean, other than running out of ammo. Ammo is always like, that's kind of the biggest way you can kind of screw yourself over in a Resident Evil game. Is because in a lot of them, it's, for the most part, you can run past most things, but every once in a while, they'll give you either a boss or a certain enemy you have to kill, or else you can't get through this door, you know? And man, maybe you can use the knife on them, but if it's a game like Resident Evil 2, where the knife takes 26 or 28 like hits to take a zombie down, forget it. You're not going anywhere.
Well, and especially this boss's attacks too. So like he's got a left-armed wide sweeping attack that he does, you know, and that's like if you're trying to run past him, he typically will try to do that. And more often than not, it's going to be successful to hit you, you know, and knock your ass on the ground. His next attack with the follow-up. So if he knocks you down on the ground with that, his next thing he wants to do is take his right arm, raise it way up, and just smash straight down onto the ground. You know, like with this like large, like it's like even like this like red light, you know, beam starts like coming out of his fucking fist as he's punching down into the ground or whatever. If you get hit with that fucking thing, oh my dude, game over. Good luck.
Yeah,
you know,
that's it.
So me at the start of the, like, having that knowledge, having that, like, that core memory from all those years ago, you know, I'm just like, I am conserving everything leading up to that fight. And now, you know, at 36 years old, you know, playing through this, it's just like the fight was no problem. You know, like I try, you know, especially after reading that, like you can just straight up just pull that lever 6 times, you know, and knock him out of the plane without firing him once. I tried it, you know, and I got about 4 done by the time he out damaged me before I ran out of healing items and whatever. But there is a way, you know, like there's a particular strategy that YouTube video was showing of like how you more or less just keep him in the center of the room and just run circles around him until the timer goes up, and you go and you hit that switch, reset the whole room again, get him in the center, run circles around it. But you do that forever, you know. It's like it's like a 6-7 minute fight at that point, you know. Like, and you're just,
and at that point you're like, is this even working? You know what I mean?
Exactly, yeah. You know. And one mistake, you know, you get hit with that overhead slam attack, like one mistake and you're done, you know, and like and that sucks, you know. So I recant some of my words about soft locking. Like there's certainly ways to do it, but I think that you can do that in any Resident Evil game, you know, like when it comes to ammo and health and things like that. So, you know, like you can get through that tyrant fight with pretty minimal stuff, especially now knowing that you can just pull that lever, you know. So at bare minimum, there is a way out. It's a really tough way to get out of that situation, but you can, I suppose. So there's that. There's something out to like that we'll get to when we get to the change of discs here and whatnot, you know, like when we change from one character to the next, because I have a theory about like how you could get soft lock here, and it's based off what we talked about when you dropped by my office the other day. But anyways, we'll get to that point. But this tyrant fight though, dude, like it's really bombastic. It's like really cool fight, you know, because like you get that experience earlier where you fight the tyrant for the first time, you know, and like in that fight, thank God I happen to have my grenade launcher on me, you know, and like took him out in a handful of shots, you know, like he's just laying there on the floor, you know, you think that you have killed the tyrant at that point because it's like the music dies down, you run on, you know. Now you're on this plane and then all of a sudden you hear this in the back of the thing, you're like, what is that, you know, and oh shit, it's a fucking tyrant again. I love this fight. I thought it was really cool, you know, through today's lens. So
yeah, no, it's a neat one and so on like that. And then you kind of realize you're in this plane. You got Alfred's chasing you and like his little Harrier and whatnot. The whole island's blowing up.
Why? Metal Gear Solid 2. There's a fucking Harrier in Metal Gear Solid 2. This game has got a Harrier. Why can people just jump in a Harrier and go? You know, like, I mean, I get it's a video game, but like, how is Alfred like so specially trained in Harriers that he can just take off after your ass? And then later, and then Chris does it later, you know? Yeah.
There was a Harrier in True Lies with Arnold Schwarzenegger. You know what I mean? Like, the Harrier was just the cool jet of like the 90s and early 2000s. Yeah. You know, that's one thing I think about too. I'm like, the Harrier probably can't fly that far though. Like, that was the thing. Is like, that's probably not a practical jet. It's cool because you can take off like a helicopter, you know, and I used to, when I was a kid, the Harrier was my favorite. I think because of like True Lies and things of that nature. There was this game on Sega Genesis where you flew a Harrier and it was like aerial fighters. I thought it was the coolest thing. Task Force Harrier, I think was what it's called. So there was like
my first Harrier experience was fucking Solidus and Metal Gear Solid 2, you know, like flying around on that thing with Vamp on top of it and shit, you know, like, you know, just some cool shit. You know?
But I bet you that Harrier doesn't have a very long distance that it can go, like on fuel and all that stuff. And so I'm thinking about this thing flying, like, I know this, like this island, in my mind, I always picture it like if you're in Paris or whatnot, the island somewhere, like, I like to assume it's just somewhere between like France and England. But for some reason, I think it might be somewhere closer to Antarctica, actually, where this Rockford base is, you know, so I think it's more southern, like some kind of like colony island that, you know, Umbrella bought from like the Dutch back in the day.
yeah, exactly. You know, like I was thinking about that too, in that, like, it's got to be off because there's so many ties with Resident Evil to Africa, like the continent of Africa. Like, it's probably off the, you know, somewhere out in the Atlantic off Africa, I would imagine. But
that would make logical sense somewhere down there and somewhere towards the south, so that the flight to Antarctica is not that far,
right?
You know, so. Whatever, you know, Claire and Steve, they come crashing into the Antarctica because the thing's on autopilot. And for some reason, it's on autopilot, but it's not on auto land.
Yep.
So they come crashing into this Antarctica base and so on like that. And I'll actually say, I think this is one of the coolest parts of the game is the Antarctic base, because you've never seen Resident Evil in snow. This was the first time you kind of had that. It really works for the graphics, and especially in the Dreamcast kind of era, and just the look and feel of like, here's this abandoned base, and it's got this icy cold feeling to it and so on like that. And you're going to be going and running around exploring this and searching for things. And it's like, I think it's just a cool setup for, like, in a sense, you would call it the laboratory section of a Resident Evil.
Yep. Yeah. I love this area. With one exception, with one very hyper specific,
the worst room of them all.
Of like this very well possibly could be one of the worst rooms in all of Resident Evil. I think like it is moths, man. So enemies in general, I think that flying enemies in Resident Evil in static cam, tank control Resident Evils suck. Like in general, they are not my favorite things.
Crows, the bat, it doesn't matter.
Yep. All of them are a pain. Bats in this game are a fucking pain. You explained to me the other day when you dropped by my office that you can pull out your lighter and they just fuck off, and I'm like, okay, of course that would be a thing,
Yeah, exactly. I remember literally as a kid, like me and RJ killed all the bats in a room once. You just did stupid stuff. Like, I think we might have killed with the knife though, so maybe it was a little bit more ammo conservacious.
Yeah,
but
here is moths and the introduction into poison mechanics, and these two things combined brought me so much frustration. It wasn't so bad originally, but when I get to a certain section of this Antarctic area where you have to get a certain key item, and like having to run through this room so many fucking times, and really all it takes is like one of these moths just to touch you, land on your back, drop a larvae on your back or whatever. Now Claire's poison. Now she's taking damage. She rips the thing off. There's an infinite planner in this room, that has blue herbs for you. Great. Fantastic. I can never get poisoned ever again because I got it. Dude, it's like you go and you pick up the damn blue herb, you heal yourself with that. Okay, now I'm good again. I'm going to heal my wound now, like get back to full health. Turn around, try to run for the door. The thing reaches out, it grabs you again. You're poisoned again. And it's like, motherfucker, you run back to the box and you do it all over again. And it was just a lot of that, dude. It was just a lot of just getting poisoned over and over again.
Oh God,
it was just so annoying. Just so annoying.
Yeah, and the worst part too is it's like I thought about, I'm like, okay, maybe I can kill them all in here, and so I killed them all once. You killed like 4 moths in the room. I'm like, cool. Come back in that room again. There's 4 more moths in that room. And you're like, dude, that is if you could kill them, I don't think it'd be that big of a deal. But the fact that they keep respawning and there's so many of them in there, I think it's one of those ones like there should literally be like one in that room that you're like, okay, you just gotta dodge him, and that's all it is, Yep. Or kill it each time. If it was just one, you would kill it every single time. It wouldn't be that big of a deal. But the fact that there's 4, and you have to run through this room like 15 plus times because it's back for it's like the main room you're running back and forth in.
Well, you have a safe room. You have like a primary like item room. Like in like where you do the conveyors and all that shit. Like that primary room is another major room, and then you got the staircase that brings you up to the upper floors. Yeah. And this is like the centerpiece in between all of that. And it's like, oh, dude, it's just so... Yeah, very frustrating.
This is really like probably the worst thing in this entire game is these stupid moths, And yeah, it's just... I really, even when I was done with it, I didn't really have a good strategy for that. I literally didn't. It was just hope for the best. That was about the only thing I could do is just, it's either I could kill them every single time. That wastes a lot of ammo though, because they're not the easiest to hit. And unless you're using if you use the double pistols, might not be the worst. But I oddly barely use the double pistols, which I probably should use them a little bit more. I actually use them as crisp because I actually left them in that box for so long that he got to use the full extent of those.
Yep. Yeah, because again, like even the respawning thing, like that's really annoying because like there was sections where like I cleared out bats and bats wouldn't respawn, and then there was other sections where I would clear out bats and then they would respawn. Like there's like a bathroom in particular that they respawn in and whatnot. These things though, like every fucking time they respawn. Just really annoying. The other thing too is that they're extremely inconsistent. So on top of being able to grab you and drop a larvae on your back and poison you that way, they also like they like spit out these like spore looking things, you know, so it's like these like poison clouds, you know, that spit out.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get hit by them and you don't get poisoned, but other times you do, and it's like I never could quite figure out, because, you know, like Claire will go there, will be in that cloud and go you know, like, you know, getting hit by it, you know, and then I run out the room and like check my health, and it's like, no, I'm not poisoned, or yeah, I am poisoned, you know, and it was like it had so many variants. So again, when you have a bullshit mechanic with a bullshit enemy that fucking respawns in a primary area that you got to run through all the time, that is extremely inconsistent. Failure of a mechanic, dude, just get rid of it. You know, like,
yeah, no,
point.
it's
like,
it's just such a pain, you know. And even besides with the larvas on your backs, like, you know, there is rare occurrences where that doesn't poison you. It most likely will poison you.
Yeah.
But there was one time I remember throwing down like, oh, I'm not poisoned. Well, that's good. Yeah. And there was a period where I just ran around poisoned. I was just like, whatever. Mm-hmm. I just don't want to. Because it was like the chances of getting that herb and then like not being re-poisoned again was quite high.
Right.
So I just kind of ran. And I was also kind of thinking, because I know both of us sort of tested this theory, which I think we've come to the conclusion that the poison doesn't wear off like other Resident Evil games. Yes. Is because in some other Resident Evil games, if you stay poisoned long enough, you'll eventually just go down to danger, and then it'll just wear off, and then you're just in danger. That's kind of what happens. This one, I think, stays with you because I had it for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, because another enemy later on that we'll get to and whatnot, but like there's another enemy that will poison you later on and whatnot. They as well are very inconsistent when they swipe at you. I'm talking about the hunters.
Oh, but, the poison hunters. Yeah.
The poison hunters. When they swipe at you, it's like, you know, on top of doing a ridiculous amount of damage to you with those swipes, you know, like sometimes you're poisoned, sometimes you're not. So. And this is way later on with Chris, you know, as we're playing as Chris or whatever. But like, yeah, I tested that where I got hit by one of those hunters, you know, killed both of them in that room, and waited for a while, you know, with the poison effect on. What's cool about the poison effect that I enjoy, and this is just as like a visual thing, you know, it's like you'll notice that, you know, Claire will like be holding onto her shoulder like in a caution state, you know, and she'll be like kind of, you know, moving along and whatever. And the longer that you're poisoned, then she goes down into danger state. Now she's like really limping, you know, and whatever. And I was always, you know, like too scared to like let that persist. So I would just run back to my item box, grab a blue herb and heal it, you know. But in the case of Chris, you know, like I let that last for a really long time. And yeah, I don't think it'll ever kill you, but I don't think it'll ever go away either. So I ran around for a good like 10, 15, you know, probably about 10 minutes, you know, like with the poison effect in a danger state, you know, like slowly limping. And yeah, Chris just wouldn't croak. So
yeah. But yeah, no, it is kind of a pain and so on like that. And as I said, that moth room, ugh. But whatever. Once you kind of get through there, the rest of the stuff
part of the game.
It's the worst part of the game, but the rest of Antarctica is pretty darn cool. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you just kind of go through the different puzzles and so on like that. And there's some goofy ones too that kind of throw you for a loop when you have to get that, you know, crank handle or whatever, and of course or the valve handle. And of course, it needs to be shaved into an octagon instead. Yep. Some of those things. And
so this is that's like one of the only other stories that I'll tell towards the end of the game here is. So this is where I got stuck. I was too bullheaded and too stubborn to say like, yep, let's pull the guide. Like I really wanted to figure this one out on my own. And so you pick up this valve handle, you know, and like when you examine it, you notice that there's, you know, it's a square, you know, like on the back of it. And then like a little while later, it's like I'm exploring around and like I come into this room and there's like this like cutting machine in there or whatever. And Claire physically places the valve in there. So I know that it's an item that I need to use. She places the valve in there, and then like the machine basically tells you like, you know, you need to, I'm paraphrasing, but the machine more or less tells you, you know, like you need to tell me what you want me to cut this into, you know, more or less. Because Claire has no fucking idea, you know. So like I was just walking around Antarctica going through that stupid room a million times because I didn't examine the porthole where that valve is supposed to go to, so Claire gets the pattern in her head so she can go back to the cutter to cut it into the. So bro, like I was stuck. I had this stupid valve in my inventory and I ran around for a good like probably hour, like literally probably hour of like trying to figure it out, and then finally getting frustrated, looking it up and going, oh, I'm just supposed to examine the hole so Claire knows, it registers as a chunk in time, through the game at that point, like, yep, checkpoint, she knows the pattern now. And then sometimes, the rest of the game from there, I was fine, but
yeah, sometimes those things always bother me in games when you kind of you think you can outsmart the game because you played it before and you know what to do. You're like, oh, I just need to get cut, and you're like, what the heck? It's not working. And then you realize it's like, oh, you had to talk to the area first, and then you can go back and do it. That science can really screw you over. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I guess because I actually went down there and talked to it because I did the thing first where I'm like, oh, it doesn't fit in this there. I forgot about that part. So I got that and then ran back up there like what you're supposed to do on probably a first run or when you've really forgotten. Yep. But yeah, oh man. Yep. Well, even that, and then that thing comes back around to another. That part threw me for a loop too. Was when Chris gets that, and then he's like, "Oh, now it needs to go back to its original form."
Back to a 4.
Yeah. Yep. And you got to find a little adapter piece and everything like that. It just happens to be laying around there. That took me forever to figure out where that was. Later down the line, but yeah, you go through that, and then of course, before there's that part when the gas goes to leak. Of course, you find the way out there. You're like, oh, cool. There's this snowcat thing. We can take this thing and drive out. Where we're gonna go? Oh, they find there's a Norwegian base or something like that. Yeah. Somebody wait a second. Isn't that where the thing happened? Should we go in there?
Yep, dude. I thought that exact thing.
What's worse, the thing or Umbrella's biohazard outbreak?
Yeah, exactly.
That's a good question. What is worse?
We should throw that up on YouTube.
Yeah. What is the worst thing? The aliens coming from space, that's the thing, and you got to battle that. Or is it worse to be stuck in an Umbrella lab in Resident Evil with an outbreak?
Yeah.
Let us know your thoughts on that one, because I'm very curious.
Yeah, I am curious as well. I'll have to sit on that one. I don't know myself, but
of course, when they're doing that part right there, Steve has to run the controls because he's a man, and he goes like, "Out of the way, Claire! I can run the controls. Well, look at me go!" and so on. And he's like, "Okay, operating the crane, moving it over." And then he looks over, and Claire's leaning on the rail and stuff. He's like, "Oh, she's looking so good there. Oh man, look at that ass," and everything like that. And then she turns like, "Steve, what the fuck are you doing?" And so he's like, "Oh!" and crashes that machine. Of course, lets the gas out, toxic things, everything. Like, God damn it, Steve! Now I got to go there and fix it. Are you gonna go turn that valve lever? I didn't think so. Yep. What are you gonna do while I go all do this? Nothing.
Yeah, nothing.
Steve once again screwing everything up.
I know, he's such a piece of shit. Fucking guy.
But yeah, so that kind of leads that into there, and then eventually you get kind of through this. You learn that there's this creature thing that's down below. It's just this. It's called Nosferatu. Later on, you read in a little file, but this is the looming danger that's coming up as you get to the final boss for Claire's game, in a sense. Mm-hmm. And I guess that's generally we're kind of leading right up to it. Is we're going to get to the Nosferatu battle. We get in that snowcat and everything there. And this is kind of an interesting, very unique Resident Evil battle because this is completely different than all the previous games. You never had this feature before, I guess except for Survivor. I mean, the only game that would probably have this. But you pick up a sniper rifle in this, that you can literally look down the sights first person. Once again, couldn't do that in 1, 2, and 3. And you have this battle with this Nosferatu guy who's just all tied up, monster creature and so on there, which later down the line you learn, probably way down the line, you find a note from Alexia that this is actually their grandfather, and she decided to experiment on him because that's the kind of gal she is. Yep. She's like, my grandpa's getting too old, so I'm going to inject him with some stuff and see what happens.
Yep.
Science!
And talk about, dude, because, because we're starting to get, cutscenes are starting to play pretty heavy at this part, cutscenes are starting to come in pretty heavily. And we got through, the whole island. Now we're in Antarctica, we're getting through all this area. Now we're outside. Now we're getting to the end, and I remember thinking that back then, not recognizing that there's a whole other game on top of this, more or less, with Chris's campaign and whatnot, and how special, coming across this enemy after reading all the notes and seeing all the things and experiencing, just everything leading up to this point, and then fighting this boss. However, I don't remember the boss fight itself. until, obviously until I played it this run. And this is where at the beginning of this episode, we were talking about the limitations of hardware, and like, I'm telling you, dude, this guy, so you have a sniper rifle,
Yes.
like, and the fog effects are just so egregious that like he's literally like, by the time you can see him, even just like the silhouette of him, as soon as you can see him in this version, he can hit you with his tentacle. And like the very first time I played, like I did this boss encounter, like I ran to the other side of the helipad, I aimed down sights, and I just could not see anything. And I was like, where is he? And you can hear him. Him.
He's coming right for me somewhere.
Shuffling forward and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, like, so once you get, like the silhouette of him down, and like you said, like just aim center of mass, he technically has this like exposed heart, sticking out of his chest or whatever that I suppose you could hit. And I'd be curious to understand if like the same thing I text you. I'm like, is it just literal, just center of mass? Doesn't matter where you hit, or if you actually hit the heart, is it doing more damage or whatever?
If you hit the heart, you can kill him with the sniper rifle.
Interesting.
That's the thing. So you could kill, because they only give you like 7 rounds of sniper ammo, but you could kill him if you're able to see the heart. You could blast him 7 times and die, or he'll die, or he might die before that. He might die in 5 rounds or something like that. This is one of those parts that I remember reading this back in a Game Pro way back in the day. There was like, whatever you do, you don't want to get poisoned by this here, because then it just makes there's something you gotta get the serum for Chris later on. It makes it a little bit harder because of that. So I've always been like so fearful of like, I don't want to get poisoned here. That's always the key thing. I don't want to get hit by him as much as possible. So what I just did in this one is I grabbed the sniper rifle, and then I just gave Claire the bow gun with the explosive rounds, and then left everything in the box for Chris, because I knew that he was going to need that stuff later. I did the thing where I ran to the other side, turned around, and I just went down and aimed down the sights. Of course, this isn't an inverted. Was yours inverted on the PS2?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so that might have been one of those goofy things. I wonder if it's inverted on the Dreamcast. I have a hard time imagining it not being, but
yeah.
I wonder if they changed that around this time period, because on the Xbox it wasn't either, and it was like, I'm glad that there's not that much you have to do. There is a mode you can unlock, I want to say, where you can play the game all the way through in first person.
Yep.
But that would never work for me if it's not inverted.
Yep.
Granted, this one, it's kind of, you just aim straight. Like, you really don't need to aim up and down. It's not really designed that way.
Yep.
But I just kind of stood there and I just waited. And then all of a sudden, I finally just saw just ever so slightly a silhouette, and I just kind of aimed dead center and went bam, 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 blasted off all 7 rounds. And then once he was like, okay, that didn't kill him, so I pulled out the bow gun with the explosive arrows. Boom, 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 boom. And then he finally went down. And I was like, cool, I didn't even get touched or anything like that.
Yep. So in mine, yes, Claire did get poisoned in mine. So that was definitely a thing. But yeah, in mine, aimed on sights, had to wait for him to where I could actually finally see at least some of him. Took all those rounds out with the sniper rifle, and then I was just running around with the AK, and I would just stand on one edge of the helipad, aiming into the fog, just going bap, 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 and literally the only reason why I knew I was hitting him is because you hear, like you just hear that noise, like over and over again. So and that was literally it. I did not physically see him the rest of that fight. Like I just stood on the edge of the pop, 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 and then eventually the music died, and I walked back over the middle of the arena, and he's just face first on the floor, and I'm like, all right, cool, got him. So yeah, interesting.
Let's get the snowcat and get out of here. Yeah, of course. What did Steve do? Nothing.
Yes, nothing. Absolutely.
Steve is not helpful whatsoever, but here he is. And this literally feels like this could be the end of the rest. If this was the end of the game, I feel like, I would feel satisfied. It feels long enough. It feels like you got the whole thing. It probably is as long as Resident Evil 2. Probably longer than Resident Evil 2 if just this one round.
Yeah. Yep.
But lo and behold, you get a whole, second part of the game, and finally Chris, who very early on, there's a scene where Claire runs across a computer and she sends a message to Leon saying, hey, I'm stuck on this prison island. Get Chris over here. Even though I know we were looking for Chris, can you send a message telling him that I'm stuck here? So instead of me looking for him, he needs to come looking for me.
Yep. Yep. And that so to comment on my text that I sent about that, I was missing the context of Claire getting taken to the island. Like I just wasn't thinking of that. She got like arrested and got brought to the island. So like in my head during that cutscene, like she's there looking for Chris, and like, and then she's like, well, I'm just going to send an email to Leon to tell Chris that I'm here, and whatnot. And it's like, well, why is Leon hanging on to information where he knows where the fuck Chris is? Like he's like being this gatekeeper.
Yeah, exactly. What's he doing?
So, anyways, that's where my headspace was at that moment of me texting you that exact thing, and then you reminded me. You're like, oh no, she's there for a reason. Now Chris needs to find her.
So maybe Leon somehow in the process actually found Chris. I don't know how that all kind of worked out.
I don't know either.
I like to assume Leon's just off on his Resident Evil Gaiden Game Boy mission at the same time period. With Barry and everything on that ship. But so lo and behold, Chris finally gets to the island here. He climbs on up the side because that's how he shows up to port. He just climbs up the side of the big old rock wall, and he finally shows up looking for Claire. Now you're back at kind of like the beginning of the game, and it's almost like you have your B story, like if it was Resident Evil 2, and things are kind of the same locations, but it's alternative.
Yep.
And of course, you show up right away. There's this giant worm boss that we never even mentioned in the Claire one, but that thing's running around there like a tremor creature out of, tremors.
Yep.
What they call them? You always want to call them tremor, but they actually have a name. They're
I have no idea.
Yeah, I'm drawing a blank on what the heck the actual name is, It's like one of those ones where it's like, you think of like an alien, you call it alien, but it's like, well, it's a xenomorph.
Oh, yeah, exactly. No,
they called the movie Xenomorph, it'd be confusing. That people have a hard time spelling it, probably.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's just like, this is like a mini sandworm from Dune, like basically. Yeah. Cool monster design. I thought it was actually really neat. And I remember that in particular. I remember being too scared back then to even attempt to fight the thing as Claire, anyways. And come to find out, like it's actually bullshit. Like you should not fight the thing with Claire because you don't get anything out of it.
Nope, because that's exactly what I did. I went and killed that sandworm because I thought you did. Because once I got the grenade launcher, I'm like, I'm gonna go kill that worm because I thought it dropped something. Doesn't drop anything.
Now does it exist in
Chris's file
in Chris's campaign?
Yes, it does. So it
comes back anyways. Wow.
So it doesn't come back anyway. It would have been kind of a cool feature that, like, maybe if you killed it as Claire, when it appears as Chris, it's just really weak or something like that. That would have been kind of the way to do it. So at least it gave you a reason, like, why, if you did kill it, it wasn't a big deal. But no, it just kind of screws you over, and that's it.
Well, like, because so right here, right at the start of Chris's campaign, like we come across the prison guard dude from the very start of Claire's campaign, and like having that interaction with him, like he basically he gets eaten by the monster, like by the sandworm thing, and then Chris has to save him, like blow up the monster thing, save him out of it, and then that's where we have our exchange of the he gives you the lighter at that point, or does he give you a lock?
Yeah, because earlier on Claire has the lighter, and then she exchanges it with that guy for a gift because she brings him the hemostat, and then she gets the lockpick. Yeah. Which I kind of wonder, I wonder if you could go through the game and not do that.
I'm sure you can, because the only thing that the lockpick does is briefcases that you pick up, and then the like locked like desk drawers and stuff like that. I don't think that it has any like
no key items.
Because I was thinking about that too, and because in the thought of soft locks, because that popped up into my head too. I was like, what if you didn't have that lockpick? You're literally just missing items at that point, but not key items. So
I guess that's true. So I think that's it. But then it made me wonder. Well, I guess because Chris gets the lighter. And I guess maybe that's only, once again, bonus items too. They're nothing key items from that lighter, so I guess maybe you could get past that then. That's interesting.
Yeah.
But whatever, Chris has to battle that worm down there. He gets the lighter. This is the biggest downfall. Because of that lighter, you can get the Uzis, in the room beforehand. So if you if you didn't have that, you're actually missing out on quite a bit, because those Uzis can carry you for a long time.
So really funny about those fucking Uzis. So you tell me about that, like as I was starting up Chris's campaign, you're like, hey, don't forget to save the dude so you can get the Uzis and blah, blah, blah. and I got them, and they were in my inventory, like in my physical inventory for a little while. They ended up in my item box for a little while beyond that. I was expecting to use them at some point in Chris's, like fights with bosses or whatever. I never did. Like, they're still 100% sitting in my fucking box like that entire run. I never used them. So...
Well, it's kind of funny because what I use for my Chris run is like when I was on like the Rockford Island and everything like that, I generally gave him the dual pistols that Claire had because they still had like 76% left in them because I didn't use them that much because I was just using the pistol and the bow gun during Claire. Especially the bow gun. The bow gun was perfect for the beginning part. Yeah, that's the way to go. It doesn't do a whole lot of damage, but you got like 300 rounds in that thing.
And the thing just has a retarded fire rate. It fires as fast as you can tap that button. It's just pop, 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 pop. It's just like Jesus.
And you don't have to reload it and everything about it. Yeah, and then the explosive arrows are amazing. Those things do so much. They're like the perfect boss one. In a sense. So I used those dual pistols for a long time, just kind of conserve my regular pistol ammo with Chris. And then when I got to Antarctica, I used the Uzis throughout that part there. And I used that all the way up to almost the very end. I literally... Damn. Yeah, I think it crapped out on me like past the first Alexia battle.
Yeah, see, because all I did, so there is a slight upgrade system in this game, literally specific for your pistols. But so in Claire's campaign, I upgraded her pistol. I left it before the end of the Nosferatu fight or whatever, so I left that gun for Chris. Forgetting that he's got an upgrade path for his M17 or whatever that pistol's called too. So his primary weapon most of his run in my campaign was Claire's pistol, the 3-shot.
Yeah, that's what I used too. I used Claire's pistol. I didn't even upgrade his pistol because I was using Claire's the whole time. Yeah,
exactly. So I did that. I had my shotgun on me with like just a massive, like at one point I think I had like 36 rounds of shotgun ammo or whatever, like a stupid amount. So I had that, and then I just ran around with the grenade launcher with just 12 rounds of acid rounds loaded in them at any time, just for, just in case I, needed it for a hunter or whatever, Come to find out, hunters are actually like little bitches when it comes to shotguns. Like, I mean, it's at most is 3 rounds, per.
Well, I want to say the acid rounds is their weakness. I think you could kill a hunter in like 1 or 2 hits with the acid round. Yeah, because I want to say, because each enemy generally has a weakness. So, zombies are, of course, weak against the fire. Of course, plant enemies that don't exist in this one. I don't know what the Bandersnatch, what their weakness is, if it's a fire.
I think
or
fire. I think it's fire, yeah.
Okay. And then you have the grenade rounds, which are kind of, they're nice for like clearing stuff out because they spread wide, but they don't shoot very far.
Yeah.
One
other comment. So last episode I was complaining about the shotgun, being single target like type shotgun. Not the case here, dude. You can blast as many fuckers of those things as you want,
Same with the grenade launcher too. The grenade launcher with the regular grenades, it'll clear out whatever's in front of it.
Right. So I'm again, like I was questioning that design ideal, like, in that episode. And like, now I'm like really hyper questioning it because it's like, why is that a thing? Why is that, a shotgun?
Especially for the 3 monkeys that come at you at once.
Right. So.
Yeah, it would make sense if the hunting rifle was like single shot and then the regular shotgun was wide, but the hunting rifle did more damage, so it gave you like, well, what do you want? Do you want more damage and longer range, or do you want the wide spread? Right. Like that's the trade-off. But it's not. That's the silly thing.
Yep.
Well, the one thing too, I almost kind of think if I went to play Code Veronica again and not forget is I almost think the thing that would be better to do is to just give Claire her pistol for the Nosferatu fight, but leave the bowgun in there because I didn't realize how much bowgun ammo you pick up as Chris. So I felt like I was kind of like, because he's got his own pistol, he would have done much better just having the bowgun and the explosive rounds and all that kind of stuff. That would have been the way to go. And then Claire, just give her as much pistol ammo as you want for Nosferatu and just have her blast that for the final part, and then she'll have it for her little mini segment later on.
Yeah. Yep.
But instead I did the bowgun the other way, but I was kind of like, I should have did that differently. It all worked out because once again, they do give you enough variety and stuff you can find to make up for it, So I was able to run through with the Uzis, blast my way through and do all that.
Yeah. Yeah, and like as long as you're not like insanely trigger happy, like part of the problem with Claire's pistol upgrade is yeah, it's awesome to have more or less a 3-shot pistol now, but you fucking burn through ammo. Like you burn through it. Because leading up to that point, you know, like prior to upgrading that pistol for her, it's like I just had 100, like literal 100, like 350 fucking rounds of pistol rounds, you know, like stupid amount. Yeah, no, as soon as that upgrade happened, it's just, I'm just burning through it, you know? So I ended up like, so luckily, you know, like the PlayStation 2 controller has pressure sensitive buttons, you know? So like when you fully depress down on it, it wants to do the full run, you know, full 3-shot. But you can just tap it, you know, and act like its original form. So it gets the buff for being upgraded for the damage, you know, but you can still single fire it, which is nice.
Yeah, that's the way you gotta do it, because I feel when you do the 3 burst, I feel like you lose a round here and there all the time. That just doesn't, either the enemy goes down faster or just flies, who knows, because you do just blast through it. But
now the most effective thing that I noticed with the 3 burst thing was flying enemies, bats, moths, shit like that. Like that was a nice weapon to have for those types of enemies. But again, is a moth worth 3 bursts of that 9 rounds? You know, like no. You know, so
see, and that's where I think with the moths and everything that like the double pistols might have been the way to go for those things, because you could like literally aim left, right, and shoot 2 of them at the same time. Because once again, I just didn't use. I used those double pistols for like a moment, and then I put them in my box, and then I literally. That was my weapons I used for Chris, was the double pistols and the double Uzis. That was like my core thing. You know, I kind of savored my shotgun and my grenade launcher and used those on the bosses, but so yeah, as you're going through, Chris is going back through all the same areas. He kind of runs into some of the similar characters and so on, and he's just, you know, a handful of steps behind, you know, figuring out where that Claire is, and then eventually he runs in. I can't remember if he runs into Wesker yet, but he learns that Claire's in Antarctica. He finds a way down there, and you kind of escape out of there. You come back down to Antarctica, and at least the upside though is when Chris is there and you run that moth room. No moths, but a bunch of zombies instead.
Yep. Exactly.
I'll take zombies any day over the moths.
Well, like I said, dude, like that scene of him leaving the prison area and the castle and all the shit, you know, and like literally just jumping in a Harrier, you know, like he just like finds that hangar. You go to the airport, he finds that hangar, and he's just like opens up the cockpit, jumps in it, you know, just fucking just takes off. And it's just like when you think of him in context of who he is and where he comes from,
police
and
officer.
He's a police officer from Raccoon. You know, it's just. Again, the goof amount that exists in this game is just hilarious.
I mean, granted, he was special forces in the military first and foremost.
Sure.
And then he became, you know, pretty much SWAT team member, which is like what, you know, Stars is.
Yeah.
You know, but it's like one of those ones. This is only like a couple of months after the very first game, because I think this is 3 months after Resident Evil 2. So that means that like I think Resident Evil 2 is only like a month after, if that even. After Resident Evil 1. So it's been give or take 4 months.
Right. Exactly.
You know, so it's not like he's got all these other skills along the way. You know, he hasn't been into the BSAA and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just goofy.
So so you go through all that there. You kind of go through a lot of the areas. They add some new battles. Like there's this Black Widow's giant spider you got to battle up on the ice, which is always kind of iconic. I want to say it's on the back of the case, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
That's always... No, it's just a regular spider on the back of the case there. But that's what I remember seeing. You'd see a picture of Chris and whatnot.
Yeah, well, this has... okay. Yeah, so this shows Claire with 2 pistols. So it's showing off the feature of like being able to target 2 different things at the same time. And then the other ones, I don't know if you can see that, but it's Wesker jumping off the wall at the end of the game.
Literally doing like a dive punch.
Yeah, so fun.
Which this game has like the intro to like sometimes some of the over the top stuff that comes in Resident Evil later on. It's not very much. It's just like it's like a small dosage of it. But the fact that Wesker is infected and he's got superpowers now.
Yeah.
He's the only one to be infected and not turn into a hideous monster.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But no, I love this part, you know. So like when we finally come across Claire, you know, and like she's just like stuck up against this wall with just like this like massive like just amount of like mucus more or less just like wrapped her up against the Chris goes and cuts it out, you know, and like, you know, pulls her out and shit. So if she was unpoisoned in your experience, what happens here?
So you just cut her down and she's all fine and dandy. You don't have to go do that little serum hunt real quick.
Okay. Yeah, because I got thrown on that just random side quest more or less. Like, oh, she's sick as fuck. You got to go get her the serum, which was super easy. Like, it took me a little bit to figure out where to go, but ultimately, like figured that out and got right back to her and gave her that thing and we kept going. So.
Yeah, and then so now this is the part too where like once you get that all said and done, you get to play as Claire again for a little mini moment. So if you had any items left in Claire's inventory, you can throw those into the box. And so one thing I forgot to do is there was that extra case that Claire can unlock because she has a lockpick, and I totally spaced out about it. And I can't remember what was in that case. Did you unlock it?
So the final case of the game, if it's the one I'm thinking you're saying, it's just another 6 rounds of Magnum ammo.
Oh, well, that wouldn't have done me any good anyways because I didn't have the Magnum.
Yep.
That's not the kind when you get Magnum and you're like, cool, toss that out. Don't need that.
Yeah, exactly. No, because I found, so the gun comes with 6 rounds. I found 6 rounds and then I opened that container for another 6 rounds. So like I had a total of like 18 Magnum rounds, for the game that ultimately I saved for the very end.
Yeah, and then you just blow through it real fast and go, oh, there we go.
4 shots.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I guess that's better because I'll say I used the grenade launcher on Alexia towards the very end, and it took me like 15 shots of it.
Yeah,
I didn't use the grenades actually came.
Her first form, I should say, was 4 shots.
Oh yeah. I had to use the shotgun on that, and that was not very convenient.
No, yeah, not bad.
But it's just because the fire is always in your way against her. But what's funny, going to that Claire where you play as her again for a moment. This is the only time that I actually got 3 retries in the entire game, and I got them for kind of like dumb reasons. The Claire has this one little puzzle she has to do where she has to drop this cannon and a little ball comes out and there's this smashing object coming down, literally like in a torture chamber thing.
Yep,
I got a death on that one too. And so like you gotta trigger it so it comes down and smashes, and then you gotta run towards it again, put the thing down from your item menu and run away real quick. And I got caught on it like at one of those points. And then when you go to pick it up, like once it's broken and free, the thing actually turns off, and it's, so on. But that's one of those ones where the game's not really made specifically for that. That's like that thing too. I think about if you're doing a speed run on it, because in order to get an S rank, you can't save except for that one disc change save. That's the only free save you get when you go to Antarctica the first time. You can't use any first aid sprays. And you can't use any retries. That's the thing. And we never mentioned that before. This is the first game that actually gives you continuations. They never had that in Resident Evils beforehand. And it's actually kind of definitely almost like an amazing feature to have. You take that for granted nowadays because every game's used that forever. But like at this point, you never can really get truly screwed because of those. Like, they don't always save right as close as you would want. But the fact that like, if you kind of realize, like, boy, I haven't saved for 2 hours, and then you die all of a sudden, at least that retry lets you go, oh, I'm not that far back. Okay, cool. I'm good to go. That's like such a good thing. Granted, I feel that's how, like, in a sense, this game, because it only has the one singular difficulty, I feel they leave, like, hard modes if you want to just do that speed run. If you want to do that speed run and try to get that S rank, that's hard mode, But if you don't care about that, that's okay. You can use the retries. It's not going to do anything except for give you a D rank.
Yeah, exactly. No, I was very surprised. So one of the first, it might have been my first death. Anyways, in the Nosferatu fight, so you're on top of that helipad and you run over to the staircase and the cutscene plays and then you fight him right there, and like the save point prior to that was probably a good 3-minute run, to get back to that point or whatever. So in that fight, I fight him for the first time and whatnot. And like I said, like I struggled with the very first encounter with him. He ended up killing me. So, game over, you died, screen, whatever. And then it says, like retry, and it says yes. I fully expected to just respawn right back into that save room and do the run back, all the way back to him. But no, like it launched, like you're standing on top of the helipad again right before the cutscene. And I was like, damn, I was like, like I didn't, it took me by surprise, like I didn't expect it. So yeah, it is a good feature.
So this game, I thought about, you really almost, if you didn't want to save ever, except for like when you want to turn the game off, like you could almost just run through the game, just use those retries only.
Yeah.
And not have to worry too much, But yeah, the 3 deaths that I got is I got that one. And then as Claire, you have to go and you finally find Steve, and he's all chained up where Nosferatu was sitting earlier and whatnot. Yep. And then, of course, as you try to get him free, he busts on out, and so when he turns this big old green mutated monster, and I kid you not, it looks like the third boss on House of the Dead, where it's like that amphibian, like creature from the Black Lagoon thing that jumps on out and starts swinging around its big halberd. Like, that's what he looks like. And I died at this part because you have to turn around and run, and Claire's running, and she gets hit. And then I was kind of in caution, and then she's going again. I'm like, I can make it. I can make it. Like, no, you can't. You got to stop and heal every single time.
So this,
and I don't know why I felt ballsy. I'm like, I can just do it.
Yeah.
But for some reason in my mind, I was like, I want to see if I don't have to waste a thing there. The dumb part is this is one of those ones where when I hit the retry, it made me do that stupid smashing mini game. I was like, God, I gotta do that again.
Yeah,
Are you kidding me? There wasn't a checkpoint right before that cutscene. Yeah.
Same thing happened to me. This is another point of the game that I would believe that you could get soft locked on. If you don't have enough healing items to get through this, there's just no way. I think you are going to get hit here at least twice. And if you don't, if you can avoid this getting hit here, please show me the strategy, because I tried and tried and tried. And like, dude, like, there's just no, you can avoid the first swing, but the second swing is always going to hit you. So you at least need 2 full heal items, red, green herb, or, health spray, 2 green herb, whatever. There's just no way. Like, and surely there's a way. Surely there's a way.
I literally read in one of the guides that there wasn't. You just have to heal. That was the strategy. So I kind of wonder. Yeah, that's such a bizarre one because it's not an actual boss fight. It's just a runaway sequence.
So I think
there is. I want to say there is a healing item in that little prison cell area that you can pick up. So if for some reason you were totally zeroed out, you'd at least have. And I don't think you don't have to heal much. You could just literally use 1 green herb and then use a second green herb for the second one, and you would be fine. So you could use You could use the most bare minimum.
He was taking me from green fine to dark orange in one swipe. So and then what happened was, like, the first time I died to him, I got hit with that first hit again, dropped me down to dark orange hurt stage. Took a green herb, 1 green herb, brought me into yellow. Yellow's not enough. You have to be in green.
I guess that's true because you can't run fast enough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, interesting.
Because the second time you get hit in yellow, will bring you down to red. It kills you in 1 hit.
Yeah, and then probably if you're in danger, you just can't move fast enough to get to the exit.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So, that part is kind of a weird one there. The other soft lock part we were talking about is there's the blue card reader that technically you should be able to use of Claire to open 3 gates, but one of the gates you just don't necessarily go through as Claire. So I had it held, till Antarctica and everything like that. And same with you. You told me you had the card as well. And so it just sat in our boxes for a long time. But there's a gate that Chris needs to get through later on, and that's where I use the blue card. I had to run back to the item box, get that blue card, open the thing up. But the one thing we were talking about is, what if you were for some reason just holding on to that as Claire during the Nosferatu fight?
Yeah.
What would have happened then? I think that's one of the things that could have screwed you over, because I don't think there was a way for Chris to get into that room without going through that gate.
Yeah, after you mentioned that, because I went and I looked at the map, and I'm pretty sure every exit to get to the other side of that gate is blocked. Because of the alternate version, for Chris. I would like to hope that the developer would have thought of that and said, like, in this instance, it's a if then else statement at that point, but in this instance, Claire has it. We go through the cutscene of Nosferatu, we defeat him, we play as Chris. Now we're back into the section again. Maybe that's just a trigger point just to have that gate open, like maybe something like that. But it's hard to say.
I kind of wonder, but I think you could screw up. Why you would have that key with you on Nosferatu fight? Who knows? Maybe you're just assuming that you're going to find that door that's going to open it up at some point, and then next thing you know, you stumble into a boss battle.
Well, exactly. And what's funny about the indigo blue key card thing between you and I is like I know you've played this game multiple times. I've played it at least 1 time over or whatever, but neither of us could remember where the fuck that gate was. So.
Well, it's that one that's like, even though I've played Resident Evil Code Veronica, I guess, trying to think, the last time I probably played through it was like 5 years ago. So there's a lot that can be forgotten sometimes among those like small things there. But yeah.
But the fact that we both missed the same gate.
We both missed that same thing. Because it
really tells you it's not necessary for Claire to be there, So.
Yeah. And it's one of those ones I don't even remember if you necessarily see it the same way as like a regular door, because it's like an in between. It's not like a door. It's like an in between room one. So I don't think it appears on the map. So I think that's how I ended up missing it on Claire. Because I will say that's one of the hardest parts about the Chris file is, Claire, the map's all fresh and brand new, and if you haven't been in a room yet, it's blocked off and you can see the doors. When you're in Chris's file, everything's already generally unlocked except for the handful of new areas you do go to. So trying to find your way around is like, oh, where am I supposed to go sometimes? Just because it's like the map's already exposed and so on. I almost kind of wish the map wasn't exposed like that. I wish Chris has like rediscovered everything. I think somebody would complain about that, but I just wish that just to be a little bit easier to know what the hell I'm looking for.
It would have fed into the B campaign more, like I would have enjoyed that, just reset the map, like have the alternate version where you got different pathing and whatnot, but just reset the map. So
maybe Chris doesn't have to find like the map stuff, so it's like it's already all unlocked, but at least like when you go into a room, that's when it lights up so that it shows you've been there. But whatever, that part's kind of weird there. Oh, I gotta tell you my third way I died, because I thought this one was kind of a dumb one. So on the second battle with Alexia, when she's all starts to get mutated and so on like that, Claire's there and she tries to run away, and Alexia shoots this fire up and so on like that, because Chris tells Claire like, go run to the exit and so on like that. I'll take care of her. Man time. Well, I did the thing where I ran for the linear launcher right off the bat, thinking that that's what I had to pick up, because that was just how I remember that boss battle. I'm like that. Well, that thing's not even ready yet. So by the time I got to that, Alexia pushes Claire off the edge, and I was like, I watched Claire just go over the side and fall. I'm like, that's probably going to be a game over. And lo and behold, it was.
How funny.
And then when I went to go back and reload and do that again, it's not like I wish it would have saved right before that boss battle. They got kind of weird checkpoints. I had to go flip the key card and turn the alarm or the self-destruct on again. I run back out there. It took one pistol shot just to go to that cutscene where Claire's able to go away. I was like, that's all I had to do. I was just getting anxious, and I was running towards that gun. I thought the gun was going to be ready, and no, it wasn't. I forgot. You have to do a lot more damage.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So just before we get to, I can't remember if it's that section or not.
I think we got to back up a little bit there. That was just
because the first encounter with Alexia is because this is where she fights Wesker, and then Wesker leaves, right? And Wesker takes off. Is that where this happens?
You battle because you come into literally the mansion that looks like Resident Evil 1 all of a sudden. You're like, what the hell? Yeah. They built this down in Antarctica and so on like that. And there's a handful of other rooms that are kind of straight out of Resident Evil 1. And then Wesker appears here, and I think at some point you learn that Wesker's just down here because he wants the T Veronica virus for himself, because he's got all these extra curricular activities he's going to do with it, and he doesn't want anything to do with Umbrella or anything like that. He's on his own mission now. He sent Ada out to go get the virus in Resident Evil 2, and now here he is, and which I'm not too sure if that stuff of Ada working for Wesker was fully mentioned in 2, or if that kind of stuff came from later day games. Whatever. There's actually one thing I noticed. I wrote this down in the notes. There's a mention of Trevor in the notes here before in Resident Evil the remake. There's Lisa Trevor and all that kind of stuff. So they mentioned George Trevor actually in here because he's the dude that built the mansion in Resident Evil, and I think the same one with the Resident Evil 0 as well too. But that character I thought was always brand new with the remake.
Interesting.
He was mentioned in one thing, and I remember writing that down. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. They just sort of, I don't think they said George Trevor. They might have just said Trevor, who built the mansion. But the thing is, it led into that. But whatever. Going back to, you got Wesker there, so there's this kind of three-way struggle. There's you. He realizes Chris. He didn't realize Chris was here. He knew Claire was here, but for some reason, he didn't expect the brother to show up.
Yep.
And he's so pissed at Chris, which really Chris, let's be honest, didn't do. I guess Chris kind of screwed it up for when they got down to the lab in Resident Evil 1. He got smacked by Tyrant and so on there. Maybe that's what he's truly pissed about, is getting stabbed by Tyrant, but it all worked out.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. No, dude, this is another side of this game that I kind of forgot about, is so the movies went this way with Resident Evil, and you start to see it especially in my mind anyways, is the core difference between something from RE4 to 5 to 6, you know, and being like just crazy over the top action and whatnot. I forgot that existed in this game, and Wesker like fighting with this fucking, you know, chick. And just slugging it out too, dude. Like they're just like full fist and just you know, like punching and shit. Like he's like running along the walls, you know, like doing side flips, like smacking her in the judo, chopping her in the head and shit. And like, oh, dude, just hilarious. It's hilarious, is what it is. But actually, really entertaining. You know, like I actually really enjoyed these scenes. You know, I thought they were really funny.
Well, it reminds me that Code Veronica is being put together, and the Wesker stuff sometimes feels like a secondary thought. And then they all went and saw The Matrix, and they're like, "Shit, you know who should have powers like that? Wesker, and he'll come back." Because it almost kind of feels like you could totally tell this tale and not have Wesker in it one bit. He does not actually serve anything in here other than the fact he's just here to steal stuff.
Yeah.
The whole story could be told from just the Ashfords being the entire villain the whole time, no Wesker whatsoever, and you don't lose actually anything for Code Veronica. Wesker's just more like a bonus plot that's thrown in here.
Oh, yeah.
The fact that he survived, it's like the dun dun dun.
Yeah. It's just like it's just more of the, you know, he's a flavor text character for me in this game. You know, like he really, like you said, he easily could have been removed and not a whole lot would change here. You know. No, this is definitely Claire and Chris's story, you know, for sure. And the Ashford story, really. That's really what this is. So,
well, it's Claire finally gets to reunite with her brother. So once again, it brings this whole trilogy together in a sense, you know. And I will say that because you know you go into the battle, you learn who kind of Alexia is and how she was a super genius and how she, you know, not only injected the virus into her grandfather and turned him into Nosferatu, she injected the virus into Steve, turned him there, and then she also did a thing where she injected herself to test it and then froze herself for 15 years to wake up later on so that she could see what the results are. So she's been doing all these weird experiments and so on like that. And there's other story stuff. I think it says in like those Wesker reports that William Birkin like was always very jealous of Alexia because she was a little bit more of she was kind of the pride scientist of Umbrella, and he always wanted to be that. Oh yeah. And when she put herself to sleep, he was like, haha, now I finally get to be the number one guy here. Yeah, screw you, Alexia. Go back down to Antarctica.
Yep.
And so on. So you have that, and then you go into the big boss battle with her as the place is about ready to blow up and everything like that. You take her out with the grenade launcher or the Magnum like you did, like the way you're supposed to. And then you got to pull this linear launcher out. And this is the part where it's like, okay, non-inverted controls. And I know I have to aim up. At least it took me 2 shots to take her down. So at least it wasn't that big of a deal.
You're fortunate. Oh, dude, I ran around. So the mechanic of this fight is that this fucking thing's like flying around. And first off, I didn't recognize that there was that weapon in the back of the room. You know, like I didn't see it. I didn't, you know, like whatever. So I'm running around like an idiot with my basically the one gun I have, because I have like 3 shotgun rounds. I have like 6 pistol rounds, but I had a full 12 acid rounds in my grenade launcher because I hadn't used it up until that point. You know? So like I'm just trying my best to like let this thing fly around the room, you know, and it shoots out 4 flame balls, you know, at you, or like 4 little flame shots at you or whatever. So avoid all that, and then it pauses, and it like pauses just for a brief second. So like I'm sitting there with the grenade launcher, like, you know, running away from the fireballs or whatever, and then finally stops and like turn, try to angle myself just in the right way, go pa 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 pa, miss, and I'm like watching my ammo reserves go from 12 down to 9, do another circle around, 9 down to 6, 6 down to 3, 3 down to 0. Now I'm out of ammo, and I'm like, well, I might as well just reset, you know. So like I let it kill me, you know, and then I like restart the fight all over again. Then I recognize that thing's in the background, and I'm like, oh, okay, and it's infinite. So.
Yeah, and I think it makes a little like sound or something, but that's about it. It doesn't really draw enough attention to it if you just didn't know. You know, I guess you sort of see it if you talk to it in the beginning. It says something about it, but that doesn't really make a sense. Linear launcher, what the hell is that?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, but I was just glad because I was like, dude, this, you know, because of the aiming thing in this, like this could be a pain in the ass. But the aiming, kind of had like, I think it kind of auto targets a little bit, not auto targets, but like you shoot it as long as close enough. That's all it takes.
See, I couldn't even on my second time, dude, because like I picked that thing up and like I'm aiming, I'm doing the same thing. I'm like running away from the fire, waiting for it to stop, you know, aiming up, taking a shot, and it'll just move a few pixels to the left and it just goes right past it, you know, and it's just like, damn, you know, so like run around again. It took me a while. And is it literally just one shot? Do you just have to hit it?
I think that's it, because I think
triggers.
I missed my first shot and then I shot the second one and I timed it out and I hit it. You know? Okay. And that was it, because I just ran to the corner, aimed up, missed once, waited, it slid over. I saw that it went like left, right, and then it was like, phew, boom, and got it. I was like, cool.
Oh, perfect,
but I don't think you didn't have to be like ridiculous accurate, because I didn't feel like I was spot on, but I thought it was close enough. And
so I missed the thing probably a good 8 times before I finally hit it, you know, like, so, but anyways, yeah.
So you defeat her there and so on like that. And then it sort of goes into like your bonus ending. And I think this is another part where there's a lot more footage with Code Veronica X. And Chris runs into Wesker, and I really think about it, if this would have been like the final battle in here, I mean, it sort of takes away from Alexia, but like if Chris would have battled Wesker right here and just had like, it was like, you know, it would kind of suck because it would be whatever you had left over and so on like that. I think this would have been like the perfect way to literally cap off the trilogy of Resident Evil 1, 2, and Code Veronica. Because if Chris actually defeated Wesker here, I know that it takes away from 5, but 5 could literally have somebody else in there, of course.
Right.
You know, I just think that that's the perfect area, because really what it is just, it's a long cutscene. Chris and Wesker kind of battle it out. Chris kind of realizes Wesker's all overpowered because of the drugs he's been taking and so on like that. And then he drops a bunch of scaffolding on him, smashes him, but somehow he gets up and fire prevents him from getting over there. And then he just realizes he just runs off with Claire. So it's kind of, once again, it has nothing to do with the core story. It's just like this bonus little thing shoved in there and so on like that. But I just think about, I'm like, this could be such a cool way, because this almost could actually, if you wanted to have a definitive ending to like the original Resident Evil series, this could kind of be it. You could literally have Chris kills Wesker right here. He's done for. Claire and Chris, they finally meet up together. They leave. The Antarctic base blows up. That could have been the end. You know, we lost everything in Raccoon City. Everything in Antarctica is gone. The other place at Rockford Island's gone. There you go. Umbrella's taken care of.
We killed everything with the
we
took out everything, the various viruses.
Yeah, it could have been it literally is set up to be like a perfect cap to the end of it. I know they want to make sequels and so on like that, but between 0, 1, 2, 3 and Code Veronica, you would have like, there you go. There's your perfect story.
Yeah. No, I very much agree. Actually, you're 100% right there. Yeah, that is interesting. I'm curious why.
Instead, it just leaves it kind of open-ended because Wesker gets away. And then there is a line that Chris has with Claire when they finally get in the Harrier and they take on off and they escape the island as it's blowing up, where they're like, and let's go and finish off Umbrella. And you're like, finish off what?
Yeah, exactly. And
actually, I'm kind of curious. What are they finishing off Umbrella? Because now it's all owned by, it's like the other companies that like own stuff similar to Umbrella.
Yep. Yeah, and I love this. And like this, it's a really funny like ending scene. You know, like Claire like putting her hand on her brother, like, "You'll never leave me again, will you?" And blah, 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 you know, like as they're flying off into the sunset, big old nuke going off in the background and shit. Like, you know, really funny. But
it's a good thing Chris and Claire don't have that weird Ashford brother and sister relationship, because I don't want to know what happens when they find each other.
Oh, that's we forgot to talk about with Steve's death and all that. Like, he just has this like random moment, you know, like at the end, you know, so he dies at the end, but he's known, you know, Claire for like how long at this point? Like
24 hours probably,
you know, like a day, you know. I love you, Claire, you know, as he like passes out and like dies and shit. Just so funny.
Well, I think he's just got that 17-year-old boy, probably never seen a girl, never had a girlfriend his entire life and so on. And then there's this Claire girl who just seems really badass and cool and everything, you know, he wishes. And I think it's just that kind of like thing. The weird thing is Claire's really broken up about Steve dying. Like, I know. And it says Claire's kind of new to this. I mean, she really just showed up in Raccoon City 3 months ago and happened to be in this like dangerous event and so on, going from college life to all of a sudden she's, you know, fighting these zombies out of a, you know, infected city. And even though in this 3 months she's actually gotten pretty good training, because she is kind of, you see in the beginning, she's a little bit more muscular. She's a little bit more adept to this. She's, you know, become proficient in weapons and so on. But So I mean, I do kind of believe that things would she's not going to be as hard edged as maybe Chris would be or something like that.
Sure.
But at the same time, she does still take that Steve death like really hard.
Oh,
and it's like one of those ones. I mean, you think it'd be more of those ones like I feel kind of bad for that poor kid,
Well, and again, like this is where I'm looking at it through the lens of just the over dramatization of everything in this era of video game storytelling and whatnot, So like this again just kind of hit me like, yep, it's like fucking Tidus in Final Fantasy X. Like it's that type of energy,
Well,
so.
And that's technically Japanese storytelling. It comes from kabuki theater and everything like that. That they do things kind of like over the top and melodramatic and so on like that. That's just that's always the way they've told stories. So it's kind of the weird thing is nowadays they're trying to tell stories more American and European style, and then it feels off. I'm like, well, that doesn't seem right.
Yeah.
Like something's missing now. It's like, oh, they don't even know what they want. But so yeah. Well, I forgot to mention. Alfred does run back into his sister like before he dies and so on like that. He's the one that pulls her out of her like cryo sleep and whatnot. She comes out all naked and so on like that. So they have some weird kind of brother sister embrace, and then he dies just like right there in her arms and whatnot. She's like pet him and everything like that.
Yep.
And then for some reason she shoves him back in that like cryo chamber, and then Chris finds that body falls out of there, and the Chris looks down. Hey, it's okay, he's dead. Let me take this ring off of him.
Yep, yeah, exactly. Just gonna steal this. Just take that real quick, sir. Yeah.
But yeah, no, that Code Veronica experience, it's damn solid. It is kind of, I will say, like the height of being like the golden age of survival horrors. It might be that pinnacle moment. I'm not going to say it's the best survival horror game out there, but I definitely think it kind of fires on all cylinders. It's when the graphics were like, they couldn't be any better than they are there. Probably the total height pinnacle is the remake, realistically. If you wanted to have the overall best of everything, that's got to be it. Best story, best graphics, best gameplay, yada, yada, yada. But boy, is Code Veronica still really high up there.
Yeah. It's we've been throwing things into tier lists, in terms of like what should we call this, from F to S, and like
we're giving it the Resident Evil ranking system,
right? You dropped by the other day and we were talking about this, and like I'm very comfortable giving this like a proper like A rating. Like it's not the best Resident Evil game I've ever played, but it's so far up there. And again, to have it like back to back direct comparison with RE0 to this and whatnot, having that context in mind, playing through this, it's wonderful. It's so good. I really enjoyed just we didn't get a ton deep into puzzles, and I don't want to spend a ton of time on puzzles really, but like puzzles in this game are actually neat. They're thought-provoking. Like they make you think. Like Spence said early on, like you have to get a code off of a picture that's in the back of this room that you can't get through. Like you can see the picture on the back of the wall, but the text is so small that you can't see what the numbers are supposed to be. So like, and then you kind of forget about that for a good hour or so, and then a while later, it's just like all of a sudden you're like looking at some security monitors, and like, bam, you're back in that room again, but through a camera, and you're like, oh shit, that's that thing, and oh, that's that code. Oh, okay, those click moments, dude, happen constantly in this whole run, this whole experience, and it's so good. It's so good. Wholly recommend if you got access to this in the many various ways that it's been available. Play.
Yeah, no, the puzzles are actually really good, and we have somehow, some way didn't touch on any of them for some reason, but they are great. They are challenging. Even like the weird one where you have to kind of like line up all the Ashford like family tree line and whatnot. You got to use that one note to kind of piece that all together. Most of them are never like so bad that like you're like, oh man, where the hell is that thing? I'm not missing. Yeah, they're pretty well lined up to not get you too screwed over. What the weird thing is, we're talking about versions, is you can get this game pretty well on PlayStation and Xbox. They still have the 360 HD remasters on, backwards compatible, and then on PlayStation you can either get the PS2 version or you can stream the PS3 version. Kind of weirdly enough, they have both of them on there.
Interesting.
The odd thing is this game's never been on PC, even though you can get practically every other Resident Evil known to mankind on there. Except for no, you can get 0. Never mind, you can get 0. So Yeah, you can get 0, 1, 2, 3, the remake.
Yeah, I literally have them all. They're all on
Yeah,
Steam.
and then all the modern ones too. That's the only one for some reason, that's kind of bizarre, other than like the real spin-offs like Dead Aim and Survivor and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it's weird that for the mainline series, this is the only one you can't get on PC so far.
Well, and that's also kind of, like that's where I'm going back and forth in my head. So like very commonly on this podcast, we talk about remakes, and like I've thought about the context of this game in a remake. I 100% they could do it for sure. I made the funny haha earlier about like trans, like fucking dude and whatnot. But in general, like 100% they could do this in the same vein as the more recent remakes. I don't know what they would really do like with its story per se, because like I don't feel like this is really a story that is like 100% necessary. You have to know this to know everything about Resident Evil. Like, I mean, to have the flavor context of the Ashfords and the Antarctic base and, like things like that are valuable. They bring context to other things, but I think as a narrative as a whole, I don't think that this game is like necessary per se. So like, when thinking about remakes, it's very common for people to argue about Code Veronica in general, saying like, yeah, it's probably not going to happen. And I kind of agree at this point. I don't think it will.
Well, and that's how I always kind of thought too, is even though as a Resident Evil fan, I really like Code Veronica, but if you kind of take out of that context of like the hardcore fans or anything like that, it is kind of a sort of the forgotten like gem of Resident Evil series. I feel a lot of the other things kind of come there, and it is kind of true, even though it adds a lot of lore to Resident Evil. And if for some reason you did kill Wesker in the end, it could be a perfect cap-off to a trilogy. But since it leaves that part kind of open-ended, you could kind of jump into Resident Evil 5 without ever playing Resident Evil 4, and you wouldn't, or not Resident Evil Code Veronica. I used to always, I remember, I gotta say this, back in the day, me and RJ used to always call this game Resident Evil 4. Until Resident Evil 4 came out, that was what this game was always referred to. Oh, it's Resident Evil 4. Yep. And that was its common name. And then an actual 4 came out, and we kind of had to stop doing that. But, so you could, by that standard, too, because I feel like I will say the thing is 3 probably actually adds more context to, even though it's in the same kind of environment as 2, it sort of adds, because it kind of finishes off Raccoon City with 3. That's the thing about that game, there. So it almost caps off that trilogy in a sense, a certain way too, where because Code Veronica leaves it a little bit open-ended, it more is just extra stuff. And it's not saying they couldn't remake it. I think it's actually still a pretty good candidate. I still have a feeling that I think 1 would probably come before Code Veronica, realistically. But yeah, who knows? It's just strange that they haven't ported it to PC ever. Yeah. It never had a PC port back in the day, like every other Resident Evil pretty much did. And then in all these remasters, you would have thought that realistically, when they did that 360 and PS3 one, that would have been the PC version. They would have ported as well too. And they never really did that, and I think it still would be a neat one to see some stuff added to it. You know what I mean? Just little extra game modes and so on like that, and just give it that updated treatment. This is the one that, even though I know that it's back to back with the remake game, but like just imagine in that time period, you took the graphics of almost like Resident Evil the remake and 0, and you layered those over Code Veronica.
Yes.
That would
yes, I could see it.
Granted, Code Veronica's once again, it's running in a real 3D engine and not pre-rendered, so there is that. But there's some stuff like that, because it is just amazing. Those games are only a year apart. Yeah, for the most part. Maybe you could probably argue a year and a half, between months wise. But that's not that long.
No, no.
It's just the fact that you take in like just about 2 years, maybe a little bit more. Look at the graphics of Resident Evil 3, the Code Veronica, the remake, and to see how drastic that is.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's wild, man. It's really crazy. The other thing that I will say about remakes, so it is notable. So Capcom, back before they made their official announcement of the RE2 remake, the first RE Engine remake, there was a fan project going on at that time that was recreating Resident Evil 2 in an over-the-shoulder third-person action shooter style, right? Obviously that project got shut down, prior.
They always do. I always think it's funny that people get surprised when that happens. I'm like,
right.
You know what I mean?
in current development, there is a Code Veronica being developed third party by somebody that Capcom is not doing anything about. So that might tell you that, you know, there's probably not a remake being made for this. So
yeah, well, and that's true because I've actually, now that you mentioned that Code Veronica one, that thing's been in the works for like 5 years, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it's been a while that's been kind of there. But I think some of these game companies, they like to kind of fuck with those people and kind of go kind of far into it. Let them really waste some of their life, and then we'll pull the plug.
It's free marketing.
We'll pull that plug or pull that rug out from underneath them.
Yeah. No, because I mean, look at just real brief off topic, but like just look at World of Warcraft, for example. They had private servers for Classic, you know, running for a while and whatnot. Blizzard knew about that forever, but like ultimately, like I guarantee that Blizzard marketers were looking at those private servers, looking at that, going like, what is the popularity? How many people are actually subscribed to these private servers? Blah, blah, blah. Is it worth it for us to go redevelop World of Warcraft Classic and relaunch it? Which inevitably that's what happened in 2019. They shut down all those private servers and then launched their own shit, you know. But yeah, I think that, you know, they could totally do that here. So
yeah. So. And as I said, if you actually want a remake of Resident Evil Code Veronica, once again, it does exist. It's just in a little bit different gameplay style, but the Dark Side Chronicles is really cool. It's a really cool way to go through and experience that storyline again, but with, you know, brand new graphics on the Wii and all that kind of stuff. And or you can play on PS3 as well too. Technically, you played on PS5. It's actually streamable. So on the PS5, which is kind of interesting that they put that one on there.
Yeah. Well, and the other comparison that I text you about, or maybe told you about the other day or whatever, is Revelations 2. And like, and really, when you really think about it, like, Claire's in prison, she's got a companion, she's trying to escape, you know, like, to an extent, you know, like I could see the ties there and whatnot, but obviously it's not a direct like 1-to-1 or anything. But Code Veronica, what a fucking cool ass game. And the fact that I got to play on original hardware and my disc didn't fuck up. You know, like
I know that's almost like, I hate to sort of say it, that's one of my biggest, you know, if the disc is just like got a couple scratches on them or something like that, I get so iffy about being like, do I really want to go all the way through this?
Well, that's okay. So for our audience, I know I told you about this. So I bought Code Veronica a while ago, you know, on eBay, and you know, Spence and I decided, so he hits me up like a week or so ago and he's like, hey, what about Code Veronica? And I was like, yeah, dude, I actually have the physical version. So I opened this up. So this version of Code Veronica X comes with the game disc, and then it comes with the Devil May Cry demo disc, right? So when I opened this the other day, the Devil May Cry demo disc just pops out. There's another game disc, and I was like, what? I was like, I thought that the PS2 version was only supposed to be one disc. Like, I thought that was the thing, you know, and whatnot. And I remember texting you about it, and you're just like, yeah, it is one disc. I'm like, oh fuck, like the seller literally just gave me 2 discs. So that's why I went in with confidence with this version of it. It's just like, surely one of the 2 discs needs like will work, you know.
Yeah. And then I was like, worst case scenario, I will bring you my PS2 disc, because I have that one still too, and I know it works to the very end. Yep. You know, and the next one, though, is I think my next round, though, of ever playing Code Veronica, I'm going to go back to the Dreamcast version, because it's been a long time since I played through that one. Yeah. You know?
I wouldn't mind having that version either, because I do have a Dreamcast. I haven't been collecting for Dreamcast itself, so.
Yeah, so that'd be the way to go, is I kind of want to do that. And I want to say, because some of the cutscenes, it's like, you know, they add to them, but I think some of them do sort of play out slightly different on Dreamcast, so it's, you know, there. And once again, if they're just those extra Wesker scenes, I don't think it's taken away from it. I actually might think one of those weird versions that, like, the Dreamcast might be the way to go almost, because I think a little bit less Wesker actually adds more mystery to it and so on, you know. But yeah, it's been a moment since I played that one, but that's definitely the next time I do a run through, maybe in 5 years from now or so, maybe less, I'm going to go with the Dreamcast one. I think that's going to be the way to go. But yeah, Code Veronica, check that bad boy out if you haven't played it in a while or you never played it at all. It's definitely, I think it's well worth it. I think it's one of the higher tier Resident Evil games. I think it's definitely a must if you are really into Resident Evil, especially the old ones, you know. But beyond all that, you know, you can always check out more Silent Evil podcasts, as well as the Old Man Orange and Via VHS show, all on YouTube and Spotify. Till then, I'm Spencer Scott Holmes.
I am Cameron.
And we'll see you some other time.